The Scotch in Victor Harrington's crystal tumbler caught the light as he gestured dismissively around his opulent office. 40 years I've spent building Harrington Global from the struggling import business your father nearly ran into the ground. 40 years of sacrifice while you were getting useless degrees in environmental science. I kept my expression neutral, watching my uncle perform the speech he'd clearly been rehearsing. At 58, Victor still cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and the practiced charm that had seduced countless business partners, politicians, and subsequently their wives. The board agrees with me, Eliza. Your sustainable initiatives are costing us millions. This isn't a charity, it's a business. He set down his glass with theatrical precision. I'm terminating your position, effective immediately. I see, I said quietly. And does the board know about the macabre deal? His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. What about it? Just curious if they're aware of who really owns Pacific Rim Holdings. Victor laughed, but I caught the slight tightening around his mouth. Security will escort you out. Your personal belongings will be shipped to your apartment. He pressed the intercom. Margaret, send security to my office. I stood smoothing my charcoal pencil skirt. Don't worry about my things. I won't be gone long. Is that a threat? Victor looked amused. Your father tried to threaten me once too. Didn't work out well for him, did it? The mention of my father sent a familiar pain through my chest. Daniel Harrington, brilliant, principled, and according to the official story, killed by a heart attack at 45, conveniently just as he was gathering evidence of Victor's illegal trading activities. Actually, I replied, gathering my purse, I call it more of a promise. 2 beefy security guards appeared at the door, looking uncomfortable. I'd known both men for years. Miss Harrington, we're sorry, but... The older one began. It's fine, Frank. I understand you're just doing your job. As they escorted me through the executive floor, past shocked employees who quickly averted their eyes, I felt strangely calm. 7 years I'd worked at Harrington Global, starting in the sustainability department and working my way up to director of corporate social responsibility. 7 years of watching Victor systematically dismantle my father's ethical legacy while building a global empire on exploitation and environmental destruction. Outside the gleaming Manhattan skyscraper that housed Harrington Global, I pulled out my phone and texted a single word to my lawyer. Initiated. The response came immediately. Documents filed. Meeting confirmed for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I took a deep breath of the autumn air and hailed a taxi. Greenwich Village, please. An hour later, I sat in the cozy living room of my father's oldest friend and former business partner, Lawrence Chen. Now 70, Lawrence had retired from business after my father's death, but had remained a trusted advisor and surrogate parent to me after I lost both my parents, my mother to cancer when I was 12, my father when I was 23. He fired you then? Lawrence asked, pouring tea from an antique Chinese teapot. Just as we expected, I accepted the delicate cup. He couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat. Lawrence's eyes twinkled behind his glasses. Your father always said Victor's ego would be his downfall. Tomorrow we find out if he was right. I sipped the jasmine tea, letting its familiar scent calm my nerves. Are the other shareholders prepared? All 5 have confirmed. The proxy votes are secured. Lawrence set down his cup. Eliza, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we move forward. I've never been more certain of anything, I interrupted. Victor killed my father, Lawrence. Maybe not with his own hands, but he's responsible. Lawrence didn't argue. He'd been the one to find my father that night, had seen the missing files, the signs of struggle carefully disguised as a medical emergency. What Victor never understood about Dad was that he always played the long game, I continued. The trust, the offshore accounts, the deadman switches, Dad knew Victor would betray him eventually. Daniel was always 3 moves ahead, Lawrence agreed. But Victor is dangerous when cornered. So am I. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care. A navy suit my father had bought me when I graduated from Yale, simple pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. Professional, understated, nothing that suggested the earthquake I was about to trigger. The Harrington Global boardroom occupied the entire top floor of the building, with panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline. By the time I arrived, most of the board members and major shareholders were already seated around the massive table. Victor sat at the head, engaged in conversation with the CFO, Norton Wells. The room fell silent as I entered. Victor looked up, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. "What are you doing here? This is a closed meeting." I smiled, taking an empty seat near the middle of the table. "I'm exactly where I should be." "Security," Victor barked. Lawrence Chen entered behind me, accompanied by a severe-looking woman in her 50s carrying a leather portfolio. "That won't be necessary, Victor," Lawrence said mildly. "Allow me to introduce Evelyn Blackwell from Blackwell, Sanderson, and Pierce." The name of the prestigious law firm caused a ripple of murmurs around the table. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Norton Wells, always quick to support Victor. Evelyn Blackwell placed her portfolio on the table. "I represent the DH Trust, which as of yesterday holds controlling interest in Harrington Global Enterprises." Victor laughed, though the sound held no humor. "This is absurd. I hold majority shares in this company." "You hold 27%, Evelyn corrected, opening her portfolio and distributing documents to each person at the table. The DH Trust now controls 34%, transferred from various holdings that matured upon Ms. Harrington's 30th birthday yesterday. The blood drained from Victor's face as he scanned the documents. "This isn't possible. These shares were dispersed among several shell companies and offshore accounts." "Yes," I interjected. "My father was quite thorough." The board members were reviewing the documents with expressions ranging from shock to calculation. Victor's allies looked to him for guidance, while others, those who had respected my father, seemed almost amused. "Even if this is legitimate," Victor said, recovering slightly, "these shares plus my own don't constitute a controlling interest in the company." Lawrence Chen cleared his throat. "That's where proxy votes become relevant. I believe Ms. Blackwell has statements from shareholders representing an additional 22% of the company, pledging their votes to Ms. Harrington's direction." As the reality of the situation dawned on him, Victor's composure cracked. "This is a hostile takeover." "No, Uncle Victor," I said calmly. "It's a correction." I nodded to Evelyn, who continued, "The first order of business is a vote on the leadership of Harrington Global. The DH Trust proposes the removal of Victor Harrington as CEO and chairman, to be replaced by Elizabeth Harrington as CEO and Lawrence Chen as interim chairman." "This is outrageous," Norton Wells sputtered. "Victor built this company into a criminal enterprise," I finished for him. "Which brings us to the second order of business." Evelyn distributed another set of documents, these containing detailed evidence of Victor's illegal activities, from money laundering through the Macau casino development to environmental violations in the Southeast Asian manufacturing facilities, to tax evasion schemes that had defrauded the government of millions. "We have two options," I addressed the stunned board members. "We can clean house, implement legitimate business practices, and move forward as a reformed company. Or we can watch federal prosecutors dismantle everything while we all face potential criminal charges for complicity." The vote took less than 15 minutes. As Victor was escorted from the boardroom, he paused beside my chair. "You think you've won," he hissed, too quietly for others to hear. "But you have no idea what it takes to run this company. You'll destroy your father's legacy faster than I ever could." I met his gaze steadily. "My father's legacy isn't this company, Victor, it's me." The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I'd appointed a transitional management team, initiated internal investigations, and began the process of unwinding Victor's most egregious schemes while preserving the legitimate aspects of the business. The press had a field day with the story. "Harrington Hair orchestrates stunning coup. Corporate princess reclaims throne." And my personal favorite, environmental scientist takes over billion-dollar empire, vows reforms. 1 month after taking control, I sat with Lawrence in what had once been Victor's office, now completely redesigned with sustainable materials and actual living plants instead of the sterile luxury my uncle had preferred. "The federal investigation is proceeding," Lawrence reported. "Victor's assets have been frozen, and the prosecutor believes they have enough for an indictment." Good. I signed the last of a stack of documents, a new corporate ethics policy that put environmental and social responsibility at the heart of our business model. What about the Southeast Asian factories? The remediation is underway, and the new wage structure has been implemented. It will cut into profits initially, but the goodwill and reduced turnover should offset that within a year. I nodded, looking out at the New York skyline bathed in sunset. "My father used to bring me here when I was little. He'd point to all the buildings and say, "Business isn't just about making money, Lizzie. It's about building something that makes the world better." "He would be incredibly proud of you," Lawrence said softly. "I'm not done yet." I turned back to him. "The macabre project needs to be shut down completely, and I want to expand our renewable energy division, make it the centerpiece of our future strategy. The board won't like that. Even your supporters think the transitions you've already initiated are radical." I smiled. "Then I guess I'll have to convince them. That's what leadership is about, right?" 6 months later, Harrington Global, renamed Harrington Sustainable Enterprises, released its first quarterly earnings under my leadership. Despite the radical changes and significant investments in remediation and restructuring, we showed a modest profit, defying analysts' predictions of catastrophic losses. Victor, awaiting trial on multiple federal charges, had attempted to rally opposition among the remaining shareholders, but found little support. His decades of bullying and backstabbing had left him with few allies willing to risk their own positions to support a falling star. On the anniversary of my father's death, I visited his grave alone, placing a single white lily on the headstone. "We did it, Dad," I said quietly. "The company is back on the path you envisioned. Not perfect yet, but getting there." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and I could almost hear his voice, patient, wise, always challenging me to think beyond the obvious. As I walked back to my car, my phone chimed with a message from my assistant. Malaysian government approved the reforestation project. Partners confirmed for Sustainable Manufacturing Initiative. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me since my father's death. Victor had been right about one thing: I wasn't my father. I couldn't simply recreate his vision for the company. I could do better. The inheritance my father left wasn't just shares in a company or evidence against his brother. It was the understanding that business had the power to harm or heal, to destroy or build, to perpetuate injustice or create opportunity. Some called what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as restoration, of my father's legacy, of the company's integrity, and of my own sense of purpose. As for Victor, I heard he had taken a plea deal, exchanging information on his corrupt political connections for a reduced sentence. His empire had crumbled. His reputation was in tatters, and his fortune was largely gone to legal fees and settlements. But I hadn't destroyed him for destruction's sake. I'd removed him because his leadership was toxic to the company, to the communities we served, and to the planet itself. The best revenge wasn't watching him fall. It was building something better from the ruins of what he corrupted. 6 months after taking control of the company, I authorized one final change: a small memorial plaque in the lobby bearing a quote from my father. "Profit without principle is merely theft disguised as success." Beneath it, I added words of my own: "The future belongs to those who build it with integrity, compassion, and vision." That, more than any corporate takeover or legal victory, was my true inheritance.
I am Tiffany Stone, 48 years old. I work in an accounting position at an air conditioning company. At home, I live with my husband Edward and my mother-in-law. We have no children. I first met Edward at a large real estate development company where I previously worked, and he had just joined as a new employee. I thought Edward was one of those modern men, as I saw him being liked by female colleagues and older male employees too. However, for some reason, Edward said, "Other accounting staff seem a bit inapproachable, but there's something warm and nice about you, Tiffany," and he started to hand me the accounting documents exclusively. I wasn't sure whether he was a natural airhead or just slow, but there would often be errors in the documents, or they were submitted just before the deadline. Each time, he would show an apologetic attitude but kept repeating the same mistakes, resulting in me having to do a lot of overtime. Is he savvy? Or is he just cleverly maneuvering things? While maintaining a smile outwardly, I felt a bit distressed inside. However, when he saw me struggling with a company-provided stationery, he would sometimes offer me the stationery he recommended. This attention to detail didn't seem like mere flattery. I eventually fell under his spell and ended up supporting him. We grew closer when I felt ill on the train during our commute. Possibly due to consecutive overtime work during the busy season, I couldn't bear the crowd on the train and became dizzy. Somehow, I managed to reach the station I get off for work. but I was exhausted and sat on a bench on the platform, unable to move, feeling nauseous. Edward noticed me and, without caring about his suit getting dirty, carried me to the medical room under the station staff's guidance. There, I took some medicine I had with me, rested a bit, and felt better. When I contacted the workplace, my boss instructed me to go home immediately. Edward was ordered to ensure my safe return home. Despite my refusal, he ended up escorting me home. The next morning, I went to work as usual, apologized to my boss and colleagues, and explained the situation to Edward and his boss in the sales department. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. I'd like to do something to make it up to you. Then, how about treating me to dinner on Friday? I'm a bit strapped for cash right before payday, Edward innocently requested, and I agreed with a laugh. I thought it would be a one-time dinner, but later he said I've received my salary, so let me treat you this time. As we exchanged tokens of appreciation, people around us started to see us as a couple. However, I was the only one who hurried to deny it. Edward, as always, was carefree and said, "There's no need to deny it so hastily." And before we knew it, we were treated as an official couple. 2 years later, at the age of 28, Edward proposed to me, saying, "If we get married, everyone will be at ease." So we got married. Feeling awkward about working in the same place, Edward encouraged me to quit, which was kind of unexpected. "You're at the right age, and it would be better to focus on having children." Not just Edward, but also my mother-in-law strongly suggested, so I resigned. For our post-marriage living arrangements, we initially considered living in this area assuming dual income, but we were suggested to live at my father-in-law's place. My father-in-law had died 10 years ago, and after my sister-in-law, Amy, got married and moved out, Edward and my mother-in-law had been living there alone. Although I assumed we would live together eventually, starting from the beginning was unexpected. However, if Edward moved out, it would leave my mother-in-law alone, and she strongly opposed it. Convinced by the idea of saving on rent, we started living together upon getting married. Initially, there were no problems, and it was peaceful. Amy, a graduate of a prestigious university and working for a major trading company, was my mother-in-law's pride, while she showed little interest in Edward. Amy started her new life in a condo 30 minutes from downtown and often asked her mother for help around the house. "Mom, come help. I'm too busy to handle the house chores," she would plead, and my mother-in-law, pleased, would say, "I have to support her," and helped with cooking, cleaning, and laundry at Amy's condo. Sometimes, when my mother-in-law couldn't manage things by herself, or when Amy took a break to enjoy afternoon tea with her, I was also asked to help. Normally, my mother-in-law didn't interfere much with Edward's and my life, making our living together more comfortable than I had expected. That's why I thought helping my sister-in-law Amy with household chores occasionally wasn't such a big deal. However, one day, Amy and my mother-in-law went on a vacation, and during that time, I was tasked with tidying up Amy's house. Amy was concerned that her husband, Nathan, would be inconvenienced when he returned home, so she asked me to take care of the house chores while she was away. "After we leave, please take care of cleaning, laundry, and meal preparations," she instructed, so I began the tasks in her condo as requested. I cleaned the house, washed and ironed clothes, following the routine flow of daily chores. When it came to storing food in the refrigerator, I remembered that Amy emphasized, "Make sure to chill my husband's favorite beer," but I could not find the beer anywhere, only mineral water and health drinks were visible. Blaming myself for not checking in advance, I decided to rush out to shop. I headed to the nearby supermarket. Despite searching, I couldn't find the specific beer brand. The Belgian beer Nathan preferred was a rare item, not as readily available as typical American brands. Initially, I thought I could find it in another store, but after visiting several supermarkets and drugstores nearby, I could not find that specific brand anywhere. At that time, map apps were not yet common, and I was not very familiar with the area where Amy and her husband lived. It was challenging to know what each store carried, and as I visited numerous shops in search of the beer, I began to feel increasingly stuck. As time ticked away and my anxiety grew, I decided to catch a taxi as a last resort. I headed straight to a nearby department store and finally found the long-sought-after beer in the liquor section in the basement. I entered the apartment just a bit after 5 p.m. as the evening sky began to darken. Feeling fatigued after all the running around but not forgetting about the beer that needed to be chilled at Amy's house, I hurried over. An unexpected scene awaited me there. In the living room, I saw Nathan, who had returned home earlier than usual. "Nathan, you're back early," I exclaimed in surprise and began tidying up the apron and various food-filled bags on the messy sofa. Suddenly, Nathan asked, "What's all this about?" My wife said we hired a professional for housework, which left me slightly perplexed. According to Nathan, there had been plans to call his mother from his distant hometown to live together, supporting their busy life as a working couple. He explained, "Our family, just like my wife's, doesn't have a father anymore, and I'm an only child. My mother has no one but me to rely on, and I wanted her to live with us here in exchange for her support with the housework." However, Amy had strongly argued, "If possible, I also want to bring my mother here to live with us. But favoritism is not fair and goes against justice." This statement was laden with a deep wish for balance and fairness within the family. Eventually, a solution satisfactory to both families was found, and they decided to seek external help for the housework. The cost for this service was to be equally shared by Amy and Nathan to ensure fairness. However, the actual situation was a bit different. Secretly, my mother-in-law and I were taking on the role of household support. When Nathan discovered this fact, he acted quickly and contacted Amy. Sensing trouble, Amy and my mother-in-law rushed back from the hot springs. But a fierce argument broke out between them due to Nathan's stern inquiry. Unable to leave, I stayed there. It was then revealed that Amy had been using the money given for household support for personal beauty and relaxation, as well as to spend time with her mother. Ultimately, my mother-in-law stepped forward and offered a heartfelt apology. She promised to act more carefully in the future, managing to resolve the situation for the time being. The conflict subsided. However, not long after, it came to light that Amy had been giving gifts to a popular stylist at the beauty salon she and her mother frequented and were enjoying drinks together. Given the previous incident, Nathan, furious, refused any mediation from my mother-in-law, which eventually led to a divorce. Amy's marriage ended in less than 5 years without any disputes over asset division due to the rented condo, and the divorce was settled smoothly without claims for compensation from either side, due to various speculations caused by them sharing the same workplace. Amy chose to resign and move to a different company, partly thanks to her getting scouted. She intended to start anew. However, due to the disappointment of not being able to achieve the career she desired, she directed her frustrations toward my mother-in-law and me. "All this misfortune is your fault. If you had handled things better, none of this would have happened. You are the woman who has been an obstacle in my life." Amy vehemently blamed me. Despite the unfair accusations, they began to criticize me. At a time when I was struggling with not having children, my mother-in-law coldly said, "I wanted to have a grandchild, but if the kid came from someone like you, it would have been hard to love them." "Perhaps this was for the best," she remarked sarcastically. Shocked by such injustice, tears involuntarily flowed from my eyes. But what cut deeper were the words Edward uttered upon seeing me cry. "It's too late to cry and regret your mistakes now. Why couldn't you have handled things better? The one who truly has a right to cry is me," he said with surprising coldness. Hearing those words, I was struck by a profound shock, realizing that Edward, despite knowing everything, was blaming me. I realized that in this house, there was no one on my side. Upon realizing that, I began to seriously consider divorce, but given my position of having resigned to focus on the home, it wasn't easy to vocalize thoughts of separation. While returning to my parents' home was a possibility, it felt awkward as my brother and his wife were already living there, especially since I was unemployed. Moreover, finding a suitable re-employment opportunity in my hometown seemed daunting. Amid these circumstances, I decided to aim for financial independence. Utilizing my network from my previous job, I discreetly found a part-time accounting position. I told my family I feel guilty for not having children yet. I want to contribute to the household finances, and with tears in my eyes, I was able to obtain permission to work. I started work the following month, doing my utmost best, since I was fully aware of the risks of being criticized for neglecting household duties or pressured to quit my job, even on exhausting or physically challenging days. Without compromising at work and seizing every opportunity for growth, I was promoted to a full-time position 2 years after starting as a part-timer. 5 years later, upon receiving an invitation from a former boss who was starting his own business, I transitioned to the current air conditioning company, where I have been happily engaged in my work. However, on the day marking our 20 years of marriage, while washing dishes in the kitchen after dinner, Edward, who usually spent time amiably with his mother and was indifferent to my presence, came to tell me, "There's something I need to discuss. Please come to the living room." Feeling this was unusual, I headed to the living room where Edward, without allowing me to sit down, announced, "It's already decided, but from next month, we will begin living with my mom and sister." As I was taken aback, my mother-in-law added, "Amy has said she needs some time to recover at home due to the stress of her new job affecting her health. It's best for her to relax at home during such times. Plus, having outsiders around is unsettling, right?" She said. She approached me and continued with a malicious sneer, "Outsiders should go back to their own homes," making a dismissive gesture. At that moment, both my mother-in-law and Edward were smirking at me, as if gauging my reaction, but inside, I was secretly delighted, thinking, I can finally gain my freedom. I turned to them with a calm smile and said, "I understand. I will leave tomorrow afternoon," and return to my room, leaving them astonished. The next day, after seeing Edward off to work, I waited for the antique dealer I had arranged the night before to arrive. My mother-in-law looked surprised at the unfamiliar dealer, but we proceeded with the work quickly without being distracted by her reaction. In the kitchen, we checked everything from the refrigerator to the microwave oven, dishwasher, fryer, my mother-in-law's beloved soda maker, the dining table set, and even the indispensable induction cooker. In the living area, the list included the television, air conditioner, robotic vacuum cleaner, AI voice assistant, the seldom-used hot carpet, and even the sofa set. We also quickly included the washing machine, Edward's room's PC desk and bookshelf, his air conditioner, my mother-in-law's and husband's bed and dresser in the estimate. When the dealer was on the phone talking to someone, my startled mother-in-law rushed over, exclaiming, "Wait a minute, what are you doing? You can't just barge into the bedroom like that." After being sharply reprimanded by her, I replied with a smile, "After all, I'm just an outsider in this house." I wanted to clean up my belongings before leaving, and just then, the movers I had requested arrived. In no time, the household appliances and furniture listed beforehand were being carried out one after another. My mother-in-law could only walk around in a daze, unable to do anything about the swift proceedings. Eventually, even the LED lights in the room were removed, and the dealers left. What remained were only Edward's PC, some bedding, and my mother-in-law's makeup. When she confronted me again, saying, "Do you think you can get away with doing something like this?" I replied, "I've already consulted with a lawyer about the aftermath." I picked up my carry-on bag and left my in-laws' house. A week later, the lawyer I had hired informed me that Edward, my mother-in-law, and Amy had hurried to the lawyer's office on the day they were notified. When I arrived slightly later, I was greeted with, "How rude of you to be late when you made the appointment." But the lawyer calmly stated, "We did not summon you here. It's you who came and announced after being informed that we would be your point of contact from now on." Hearing this, Edward's energy deflated instantly. My mother-in-law stepped forward, saying, "Since we're all here, let's talk. I can imagine you'd return easily after leaving like that, but if you show remorse, it's a different story," asserting herself strongly while Amy and Edward nodded in agreement, assuming I would accept their proposal immediately. How overly optimistic. After exchanging a glance with the lawyer, he began, "I don't believe Tiffany intends to return to her former life. We should discuss the procedures for divorce, asset division, and compensation." Shocked by this, the three of them erupted. "Divorce is out of the question. How audacious to talk about asset division and compensation. On what right do you say such things?" The argument escalated until the lawyer intervened with a loud cough. After the room quieted down, I stated, "The divorce is already a foregone conclusion. If there's no agreement, we'll proceed with mediation or court." They tried to protest again, but a cough from the lawyer silenced them. Following a private discussion, they surprisingly quickly signed the divorce papers. However, when the topic shifted to assets and compensation, their demeanor dramatically changed. "It's outrageous to split the assets. You were just a part-time employee and essentially dependent on Edward." They began shouting, "I regret ever having you as a wife. We should be the ones demanding compensation." They criticized harshly. What I then presented was a copy of the household ledger for the past 5 years and related bank account statements. At first, they seemed unable to grasp the situation, but as the lawyer elaborated on the details, their expressions gradually changed. In fact, I had been bearing the majority of the living expenses during that period, amounting to about $3,200. "That's impossible. I was contributing $1,500 to the household every month," Edward protested. Despite Edward's objections, when compared to the $1,500 he claimed to contribute, the installment payments for Edward and my mother-in-law's credit cards were nearly the same at $1,420. Even though his salary was deposited, it merely passed through. On the other hand, the $3,200 from my salary covered everything from the mortgage for home improvements to the loans for both of their cars, daily groceries and utilities, and even loans for furniture and appliance purchases. During these 5 years, Tiffany worked as the chief accountant at her current workplace. She allocated almost the entire amount to the household expenses, totaling about $190,000. After such contributions, still being treated as a parasite is extremely unfair, don't you think? The lawyer stated, yet they read through the copies eagerly while astonished, faced with the undeniable truth. Later, perhaps understanding their disadvantageous position, my mother-in-law suddenly softened her tone. "Tiffany, we were once a family, weren't we? Let's stop the conflict and move on peacefully in our separate ways." Hearing this, I replied, "Indeed." In a fit of anger, I sold the furniture and appliances. "Let's both act maturely." I then requested the lawyer to prepare a mediated divorce document. The divorce agreement stated that both parties would relinquish their claims to asset division and compensation. This marked the end of our 20-year marriage. However, the saga didn't end there. 2 months later, through the only social media I hadn't blocked, I started receiving numerous messages from my mother-in-law and Edward. Initially, I ignored them, but the relentless messages throughout the day became unbearable. I decided to face them one last time at the lawyer's office. Arriving early, I found Edward and the others already waiting, their demeanor unchanged yet visibly more haggard. Upon spotting me, Edward raised his voice. "Is it true you purchased a new apartment?" I had chosen a property unrelated to his company. But it seems like news travels fast. My mother-in-law also angrily inquired, "Where did that money come from? Isn't it shared property from our marriage?" I calmly addressed their accusations, showing them the document regarding the relinquishment of asset division we had agreed upon. Edward and my mother-in-law seemed to have forgotten this inconvenient truth, expressing shock before protesting. "That's the same as being deceived. The problem is you kept secrets." The lawyer intervened. "The funds for Tiffany's apartment came from exercising stock options at her new job, which is not subject to asset division. If you have objections, we can proceed with legal action." Edward was at a loss for words. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law declared, "Fine, then I'll take this to court." I calmly responded, "If that's the case, I'll also file for compensation." Edward's open search for a remarriage partner, even before our divorce, caused me significant emotional distress. With a smile, my statement turned my mother-in-law's face pale. Beside her, I addressed the bewildered Amy. "Of course, I will file for compensation based on the mental distress I've experienced in the past. I have preserved all evidence of the insults and harassment directed at me, and laid out recording devices, data storage, and printed messages on the table, causing Amy's expression to change. I mentioned, "Amy, do you know Megan Thompson? She is the daughter of my direct supervisor," surprising Amy even further. I had previously discussed this tumult with Executive Director Thompson, from whom I had received advice. His daughter Megan works in an important position overseeing a department at the company where I work. I've met her several times at various company events, like barbecues and year-end parties, where we had opportunities to interact. Megan is a charming individual who brightens the room, someone who can converse amicably with anyone. However, she had faced unreasonable harassment from her boss at the company she joined, impacting her mental health and leading to a leave of absence. Shockingly, the perpetrator was none other than my sister-in-law Amy. To touch a little on Megan's family background, her parents divorced when she was young, and she grew up in a father-daughter household with her father. As such, she largely grew up without the warm support of an older female figure. When she reached out to me wanting emotional support, I readily accepted her request. We talked over tea at a cafe, discussing everything from daily trivialities to her workplace woes. In the course of our conversations, Amy's name came up. I was surprised. It later emerged that Amy wasn't on leave due to illness, but had been ordered to stay at home because her inappropriate actions towards Megan had become an issue. I felt a strong sense of urgency and got the final push to proceed with the divorce due to a clear reason. I anticipated that if my sister-in-law Amy lost her job, she would almost certainly move into our house. Such a scenario would put me under further financial and emotional strain. While pondering how to proceed with the divorce advantageously, I was unexpectedly kicked out by Edward and my mother-in-law, which serendipitously turned the situation in my favor. To capitalize on this opportunity, I exaggerated selling off furniture and appliances. This act was a tactic to feign mutual loss to avoid property division and compensation claims, motivated by wanting to keep the movement of funds from exercising my hidden stock options. Due to Edward and my mother-in-law's wasteful nature, our savings were meager, and a strict division of assets would have left me at a loss. Thus, I cleverly strategized to protect my position while favorably navigating the divorce. I understood that claiming compensation from a party without the means to pay would be futile, even if I won. Hence, I emphasized my contributions to living expenses, creating a semblance of indebtedness to influence them to accept the waiver of property division. Edward, my mother-in-law, and Amy eventually grasped the situation. They felt relieved, thinking that expelling me from the family would restore their peaceful life. But their assumption was naive. The decline in their living standards after my departure was stark, especially my mother-in-law, who, as I had pointed out earlier, continued to proclaim loudly to friends, relatives, and even distant acquaintances that she was planning to sever ties with a daughter-in-law who could only manage part-time work and wouldn't even give her a grandchild. Moreover, she was actively seeking matchmaking opportunities for Edward, saying, "If you know any suitable young ladies, please introduce them to my son." The list of ideal daughter-in-law criteria she proposed was unrealistic and laden with unfairness. These demands were not only anachronistic but also crossed ethical boundaries, reflecting her detached personal desires. She was overly fixated on youth as a factor in a prospective wife and generally dismissed the idea of having extensive social experience. She also expected the daughter-in-law to sever ties with her family and to receive a certain amount of assets upfront from them, an exceedingly unfair demand. Additionally, she required medical proof of the woman's fertility before marriage, an extreme request that disregarded human rights. These conditions shocked everyone with their excessiveness and irrationality, subjecting my mother-in-law to widespread criticism. Every one of her utterances emanated from a deeply egocentric view, finding no sympathy from listeners. Under these circumstances, there was no room for serious consideration of her proposals, further highlighting her unrealistic demands. The outlandishness of her conditions alienated and disappointed all who heard them. Despite her attempts to impose her unrealistic expectations, the response from those around her was distinctly cold and dismissive. Even with additional criteria like beautiful, stylish, and tall, everyone sensed the emptiness of those demands, and no marriage proposals were forthcoming for Edward. Subsequently, as my mother-in-law hastened the search for marriage prospects, she faced increasing rejection and was ignored by those around her. As news of our divorce spread, they became the subject of local gossip, known as the embarrassing mother and child. Previously arrogant, my mother-in-law could no longer withstand the harsh judgment of society and began to seclude herself at home. Occasionally, cries and the sound of breaking dishes emanated from their house, becoming a whispered topic among neighbors. It seems my mother-in-law has been unable to control her emotions since I left the house. Once using me as an outlet for her stress and finding solace in shopping and trips, she may now be unleashing her frustration within the confines of her home. As for Edward, since he had left all financial management to me, he was clueless about handling money. Even after the lawyer explained the situation, he still overestimated his abilities. However, the mother and daughter duo, supposed to take over house chores, found them too bothersome and neglected their responsibilities. Their meals resorted to takeout or department store food, relying on cleaning and laundry services, leaving other minor administrative tasks unattended. Consequently, their finances collapsed within just 2 months. Edward had to retrieve his credit card from his mother, and his diet became simple and unbalanced. I heard that his meals now consisted of toast and coffee for breakfast, cup noodles for lunch, and discounted food for dinner. Laundry was done in bulk when clothes ran out, and cleaning was focused only on visible areas, leading to a decline in Edward's health due to poor nutrition and hygiene. Once youthful-looking, he gained weight, his skin worsened, and his hair became greasy, diminishing his former charm. Clients complained more and more, especially since appearance is important in sales, resulting in his reassignment to a back-office role and a salary reduction. Acknowledging this wake-up call, Edward reached out through the lawyer, expressing a desire to sever ties with his mother and sister and start anew with me. However, since I had instructed the lawyer to prevent any contact with me under any circumstances, the lawyer firmly rejected Edward's wishes. He was warned that if he tried to force his way into my workplace or new home, the police would be notified, preventing further contact. Amy, another key figure in this saga, faced stern criticism from Megan, who I had informed about the situation. Megan exclaimed, "What's wrong with you? And here I thought you might have changed at least a little bit after what had happened between us. Blaming Tiffany for your divorce and continuing such harassment. How spiteful can you be?" When Megan contacted her employer to resign, she was asked about her reasons. She explained, "It's a personal matter not directly related to my work," but then detailed the issues to HR and administration. After seeing everyone's shock, she said, "I acknowledge there were imperfections on my part too. I believed we could compromise and cooperate for the company's benefit if there was genuine remorse. However, I assert that this is not feasible." Submitting her resignation, she added, "Working under her guidance again would be mentally impossible." Megan smoothly completed her resignation process and transferred to another company in the same industry, which allowed her to work from home until her health fully recovered. At her previous company, her sudden resignation, despite being on leave, shocked her colleagues and superiors. The news that her departure was due to relentless harassment from Amy spread internally and externally. exacerbating the situation. This rumor quickly disseminated, significantly affecting the company's atmosphere. Colleagues and juniors who respected Meghan began to seriously reconsider their career paths, leading to a wave of transfers and resignations. Meghan's decisions had a profound impact on many lives. The company's management recognized the severity of the situation and convened an emergency meeting. They decided to swiftly transfer Amy to a related company in another region as an immediate solution. Although this decision was hard for Amy to accept, it was communicated with a firm stance of no other options. Initially resistant, Amy had to begrudgingly accept the transfer when faced with the threat of a possible layoff. Even in her new environment, her past actions preceded her, leading to inevitable isolation within the new office. Surrounded by colleagues who avoid her except for necessary work-related conversations, Amy spends her days in solitude. Considering resignation and yearning to return to her hometown, Amy faced relentless criticism from Edward and her mother. "You'll just be a burden if you come back unemployed. Who do you think caused all this misfortune?" They rebuked her, completely rejecting her by saying, "You're the calamity itself that brought disaster to this house." These events starkly illustrate the tragic circumstances Amy was facing. "I heard she is now working in a quiet, out-of-the-way department of a subsidiary, a far cry from her former self, becoming a humble and unnoticed presence, diligently focusing on her tasks. She has transformed into a shadow of her former vibrant self, attracting no attention and blending into the background. My own life has also reached a significant turning point. After settling the tumultuous events, including officially ending my marriage with Edward, I embarked on a new chapter with Executive Director Thompson, encouraged by the warm recommendation of his daughter, Meghan. Reflecting on the 20 years with Edward, I initially had little interest in remarrying. However, Meghan encouraged me, saying, "Marriage can change significantly depending on the partner you choose. My father may be older, but he is truly a rare gem." Indeed, in less than a year with Executive Director Thompson and Meghan, I've experienced more smiles and happiness than in the 20 years with Edward. Having a partner to share the joy of expressing oneself and living freely brings an immeasurable sense of happiness. While I sometimes regret not making this decision sooner, dwelling on past regrets is a waste of the present, which is invaluable. Moving forward, I am determined to cherish the new family life with Meghan and Executive Director Thompson, building a richer and more peaceful future together.
I worked multiple jobs, giving my spoiled sister $3,000 every week to chase her dreams. But she betrayed me, stole my identity, and took out a $50,000 loan, planning to escape to Europe. I stayed quiet, sent one simple email, and waited. The moment she landed, she called me screaming in panic. I just laughed. She thought she had won. She thought I was too weak to fight back. But this time, I was the one pulling the strings, and she never even saw it coming. I've always known my place in this family. I was the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who had to make sacrifices. And Bella? She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my parents worshipped. It had always been that way. From the time we were kids, it was clear that Bella was special. At least, that's what my parents told me. She was beautiful, talented, charming. Everything I wasn't. I was the quiet, practical one. While Bella got ballet lessons and fancy dresses, I was the one cleaning up after her messes. When she broke something, I fixed it. When she got in trouble, I covered for her. It was just expected. By the time we were adults, nothing had changed. I worked multiple jobs just to keep our family afloat, while Bella lived a life of luxury on my dime. Mom and Dad never said it outright, but I knew they saw me as her provider. It wasn't even a discussion. It was just the way things were. At first, I convinced myself it was temporary. That Bella just needed a little help. That her dreams were worth it. She wanted to be an actress, and in my mother's eyes, that meant we all had to invest in her future. Just until she makes it big, Amelia, Mom would say. You wouldn't want your sister to struggle, would you? So I worked. I worked morning shifts at a diner, night shifts cleaning offices, and picked up bookkeeping jobs on the side. 3 jobs. No vacations. No nights out. Just endless hours of exhaustion, all to make sure Bella had her $3,000 every week for acting classes, designer outfits, and whatever else she needed. And what did she do? Nothing. She didn't have a job. She didn't even try. She just lived in our parents' house, spending money like it was endless, while I barely had enough to keep myself going. But I never said a word. I don't know why I put up with it for so long. Maybe because deep down, I just wanted to be loved. Maybe I hoped that one day, they would see me. That Bella would see me. Then came the moment that changed everything. It started with a letter. A cold, impersonal letter from the bank, informing me that I had been approved for a $50,000 loan. Except, I had never applied for one. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Some clerical error. But as I dug deeper, reality hit me like a truck. My bank account was drained. My credit cards maxed out. Multiple loans had been taken out in my name. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I looked through the statements, the transactions, the forged signatures. Bella's handwriting. She had stolen my identity. She had taken everything. I sat there, staring at the numbers, feeling something inside me snap. I had given her everything. Everything. And it still wasn't enough. I wanted to scream, to cry, to confront her, to demand to know why. But then, something inside me went cold. No. Not this time. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to wait. For the first time in my life, I didn't react. I watched. I watched as Bella pranced around, oblivious, spending my money on her expensive clothes and first-class plane ticket. She thought she had won, that I would clean up her mess like I always did. She never even considered that I might fight back. One night, just a week before her flight, I did something I had never done before. I sat down across from her at the dinner table and offered to help. "You're leaving soon, right?" I asked, placing a plate in front of her. "Do you need anything? Money, maybe?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to mine for just a second. It was subtle, but I saw it. That flicker of panic, the moment she wondered if I knew. Then she smiled, fake like always. "No, I have everything covered." I just nodded, took a sip of my coffee, kept my expression blank. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing. I knew she felt something was off, but she still thought she had won. By the time she boarded that flight, she was convinced it had all been in her head. That I was the same weak, pathetic sister she had always used. She had no idea what was coming. I waited. I let her land. Let her settle into her luxury hotel. Let her believe she had escaped without consequence. Then I sent one simple email. I sat back, phone in hand, and I waited. It didn't take long. A few hours later, my phone rang. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID. "Bella," I answered, pressing the phone to my ear, but I said nothing. I let her talk first. And when she spoke, her voice was shaking. "Amelia, what did you do?" I smiled. "Check your bank account," I said calmly. I heard the rustling of fabric, the frantic clicks of a keyboard, a sharp intake of breath. Then a scream. "Where is my money? What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, finally allowing myself to enjoy this moment. "You mean my money?" I asked. "Because the bank doesn't seem to think it's yours anymore. Funny how that works." She was panicking now. "Amelia, you don't understand. I was going to pay you back." I almost laughed. Almost. "Well," I said, glancing at the clock, "I guess you'll have to explain that to the police." Silence. Then, the loud, desperate pounding on her hotel door. "Bella Carter?" A deep voice. Firm. The police. Her sharp, ragged breath filled my ear. "Amelia, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. I'm your sister." I let out a slow, satisfied breath. "You should have thought about that before you stole from me." And then, before she could say another word, I hung up. I set my phone down, staring at the screen, letting the weight of it settle in. For the first time in my life, I had finally won. The moment I hung up the phone, I felt something I had never felt before: power. For years, I had been the one left behind, the one expected to clean up after Bella, to make sacrifices while she thrived. But this time, she was the one who had to suffer the consequences. I imagined her standing there in that lavish hotel room, surrounded by expensive clothes, her suitcase half-packed for some glamorous event. Except now, she had nothing. No money, no way out. Just a door separating her from the reality she had created for herself. I didn't have to wonder what happened next. The police were efficient. I had given them every document, every signed loan agreement, every fraudulent transaction linked to Bella's name. By the time she realized she had been caught, they had already traced her location. And so, when the knocking on her hotel door turned into pounding, when she hesitated for just a second too long, they forced their way in. I pictured her scrambling, searching for an excuse, trying to spin a lie that would get her out of this. Maybe she thought she could cry her way out of it, flash the same innocent smile that had fooled people her whole life. But it wouldn't work this time, because I wasn't there to save her. I imagined her screaming my name as they dragged her away, but I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. For the first time, I felt free. But freedom is a funny thing. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly, filling the spaces that used to be occupied by fear and exhaustion. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with it. I had spent so many years living for someone else. Every paycheck, every decision had been for Bella. Without that burden, I felt lost. I quit my night cleaning job first. I walked into the office, handed in my resignation, and for the first time, I didn't care about how they would cover my shifts. Then, I cut my hours at the diner, only working enough to support myself. For the first time, my money was mine. I got my credit fixed, thanks to the bank reversing the fraudulent charges. I moved into a better apartment, not big, not fancy, but comfortable. And slowly, I started figuring out what it meant to live for me. Then the letters started coming. I had expected them, of course. The first one was from Bella. "Amelia, please. You have to help me. You don't understand what it's like here. They're treating me like a criminal." I had laughed at that. She was a criminal. But to Bella, the idea that actions had consequences was unthinkable. I didn't respond. Then came the letters from my parents. "Amelia, you've done enough. You've made your point. She's your sister. You need to fix this. Amelia, your mother isn't well. The stress of this is too much for her. If you care about this family, you'll drop the charges. Amelia, we've lost everything. The loans, the legal fees. We don't have a house anymore. We have nowhere to go. You need to send us money." Need. That was all they ever said to me. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay, if I needed anything. But for once, I had an answer. No. I owed them nothing. Still, I let them beg. I let them sit in the mess they had made, just like they had made me sit in mine for years. And the longer I ignored them, the more desperate they became. One day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Bella. Her voice was different. Hoarse, broken. Nothing like the confident, manipulative girl I had known. "Amelia," she whispered, "please, I don't have anyone else." I didn't say anything. I was wrong, okay? I was selfish. I took everything from you, and I never said thank you, and I never cared about how hard you worked. But I see it now. I see everything. Silence. "I'm so scared, Amelia," she whispered. "I don't know how to survive like this." And that was the thing, wasn't it? Bella had never had to survive before. She had always had me. Now she didn't. For a split second, I thought about it. About how easy it would be to say yes. To let her back in. To fix things like I always did. But then I remembered. I remembered every night I spent working while she was out partying. I remembered every bill I paid while she shopped for designer clothes. I remembered how easily she had thrown me away. I took a deep breath. And then, for the first time in my life, I said the words I never thought I would say. "You're not my problem anymore." She let out a broken sob. And then I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, waiting for the guilt to come. But it never did. Because for the first time in my life, I had finally chosen myself. Silence has a way of filling the spaces people leave behind. When I finally cut my family off, I expected to feel regret, or, at the very least, loneliness. But what I felt was relief. It was strange at first, living without the constant weight of their demands on my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. But Bella? She was drowning. I knew this because, despite my best efforts, she still found ways to reach me. Letters from prison, phone calls from unknown numbers, messages sent through people I barely remembered from our childhood. Each one more desperate than the last. Amelia, please. I can't survive here. You don't understand what it's like. I know I messed up, but I've changed. Please just help me get out. I'll do anything. I don't belong here, Amelia. I'm not like these people. I don't know how to be like this. You have to help me. It was always me. The one she had used, discarded, stolen from. Now I was her only hope. But I had no more help to give. I stopped opening her letters. I let the phone ring until it went silent. I erased her name from my life, just as easily as she had erased my future when she signed my name on those stolen loans. Still, it haunted me, the knowledge that for the first time in her life, Bella was truly, completely alone. I wondered if she stayed up at night the way I used to, staring at the ceiling, feeling trapped in a life she never wanted. The difference was I had been trapped because of her. And now, she was trapped because of herself. The letters kept coming, but they changed. The pleas for help turned into something else, something darker. I wish you had never been born. Do you think this makes you better than me? You're pathetic. You'll always be pathetic. You think you've won? You haven't. You're just as alone as I am. That one made me pause. Because for a brief moment, I wondered if it was true. After all, what did I have? No family. No close friends. I had spent my entire life working for someone else, and now that she was gone, I had nothing. But then I remembered. I had peace. And that was worth more than anything Bella or my parents had ever given me. Months passed. I barely thought about her. Life became something new, something mine. I started making plans for the future, something I had never allowed myself to do before. And then one evening I got a call. Not from Bella. Not from my parents. From her lawyer. I considered ignoring it, letting it go to voicemail like I had done with all the other calls. But something inside me told me to listen. Miss Carter, the man said in a measured tone. I'm reaching out because Bella Carter has her parole hearing next month. As a family member, you have the opportunity to provide a statement, should you wish to contest her release. Parole. I hadn't thought about it, but of course it was coming. She had been in prison for nearly 2 years now. With good behavior, it made sense that she might be up for early release. I should have been furious. I should have been scared, knowing that she might soon be out in the world again. But all I felt was nothing. I thanked the lawyer, ended the call, and stared at the wall for a long time. Bella, free. Would she come looking for me? Would she try to crawl her way back into my life, spinning some new story, some new excuse? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never be that girl again. The one who handed over her money, her time, her life. I wasn't afraid of Bella anymore. When the day of the hearing came, I went. Not for her. Not to speak against her. But for myself. I sat in the back, quiet, unnoticed. I watched as Bella was led into the room, thinner than I remembered, her once perfect hair now dull, her expensive taste replaced with the same orange jumpsuit as everyone else. She glanced around the room, eyes scanning the crowd, searching. Then she saw me. Her lips parted slightly, like she couldn't believe I was there. Like some part of her had convinced herself that I had truly disappeared from her life. And in a way I had. I didn't look away. For once, she was the one waiting for me to say something. I didn't. When they asked if I had anything to say, I simply shook my head. I saw the flicker of panic in Bella's eyes then. She had expected me to fight her release, to make this about her again. But this wasn't about her. It never had been. This was about me walking away. She got parole. I expected that. I never looked back. And when, a few weeks later, another call came, one last desperate attempt to pull me back in, I didn't answer. Because I had finally chosen myself. I never expected peace to feel so empty. For so long, my life had been about Bella, working for her, sacrificing for her, cleaning up after her. Even when I walked away, she still lingered in my mind, a ghost of everything I had lost, of everything she had taken from me. But as the months passed, the silence stretched longer, and the weight of her presence slowly faded. She was gone. I knew she was out there somewhere. After her parole, she had nowhere to go. Our parents had disappeared from my life, and as far as I knew, they had disappeared from hers, too. I thought maybe she'd try to reach out again, but she never did. Maybe she finally understood that I meant it when I walked away. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she was learning to survive on her own. I should have felt victorious. I should have been happy. After all, this was what I wanted. A life without her, without my parents, without the weight of being the one who had to fix everything. And yet, sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I found myself reaching for my phone, as if expecting a call that would never come. One evening, I was sitting in my small but cozy apartment, drinking tea and reading a book, things I never had time for before. The life I had now was simple, mine. No demands, no expectations, no sacrifices. Then my phone rang. I stared at the screen, my heart lurching, as if my body had already recognized something before my mind could catch up. It was her. For a moment, I just sat there, the past and present colliding all at once. Then I answered. Neither of us spoke at first. Just silence, stretching long and heavy. Then, finally, she breathed out my name. Amelia. It wasn't pleading this time. It wasn't desperate. It was just hollow. I didn't say anything. I don't know why I called, she admitted, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I don't even know what to say to you. I swallowed, gripping the phone a little tighter. Then why did you? I heard her exhale, a tired, empty sound. Because I don't have anyone else. It was the truth. She had burned every bridge, lost every person who had ever cared about her. And for once, I wasn't there to catch her when she fell. Where are you? I asked, and I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still needed to know. She laughed, but it wasn't the arrogant, charming sound I remembered. It was bitter, broken. Nowhere. Silence again. Then, she said something I never thought I'd hear. I deserved it. I closed my eyes. I ruined you, she continued, voice raw. I took everything from you, and I never even thought about it. I just expected you to be there, to pick up the pieces like you always did. I waited, letting her speak. When I was in prison, I kept thinking about you, about every time you gave up something for me, and I hated you for it. She let out another small laugh, but there was no humor in it. I hated you for being good, for being the kind of person I never could be. And then, when I had nothing left, I hated you for leaving me behind. I pressed my fingers against my temple, feeling something deep inside me crack, but not break. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. And I don't deserve it. She trailed off. I don't even know why I'm calling you. Maybe she thought I would say something. Maybe she hoped that I would tell her that it was okay, that I still cared, that she wasn't alone. But I had spent my entire life being that person. And I wasn't anymore. I hope you find something, Bella, I finally said. Whatever it is you're looking for. A shaky breath. Yeah, she murmured. Me too. I didn't say goodbye. I just hung up. And as I sat there in the quiet, the weight of the past pressing around me, I realized something. For the first time, I felt free. At 3 a.m., my greedy sister stole my business credit card and phone, draining $60,000 before flying to Italy with my parents for a luxury vacation. They laughed, flaunting my money online. A text followed. Thanks for the credit card. I smiled, typed one email, and waited. An hour later, their dream vacation turned into a nightmare. I never thought betrayal would come from the very people I spent my entire life taking care of. If someone had told me years ago that my own blood would turn against me for money, I would have laughed in their face. But here I am, sitting in the middle of the mess they created, looking back at the moment everything started falling apart. For years, I had worked tirelessly to build my business from the ground up. I wasn't handed anything in life. I earned every single dollar through long hours, sleepless nights, and sacrifices. I built a name for myself in the business world, expanding my brand and making sure I secured a future where I would never have to struggle again. But despite my success, I never turned my back on my family. My elder sister, Olivia, had never been the responsible type. At 38, she had no job, no ambition, and no sense of accountability. Still, I made sure she was taken care of. I sent her $4,000 every month so she could live comfortably without having to worry about rent or expenses. My parents, David and Margaret, weren't struggling either, but I still sent them money out of love and respect. After all, they were my family. I believed in taking care of them. But greed is a strange thing. No matter how much you give, some people will always want more. It started one evening when Olivia called me. I could tell by her tone that she wasn't just calling to check in. "Luna, we need to talk," she said firmly. I sighed, already exhausted from a long day at work. "What is it, Olivia?" She hesitated for a moment before saying, "I need more money. $4,000 a month isn't enough. I want $5,000 extra. That's not too much for you, is it?" I almost laughed. "You want $9,000 a month to do nothing? Olivia, I already give you more than enough. I have bills, business expenses, and my own life to take care of." "You're rich, Luna," she snapped. "You have everything. What's a few extra thousand for your own sister?" I pinched the bridge of my nose. "It's not about the money, Olivia. It's about the principle. You're not even trying to do anything for yourself." She scoffed, and I could hear my mother's voice in the background. "You should be grateful, Olivia. If she were a real sister, she wouldn't think twice." I felt a sharp sting in my chest. I had done nothing but support them, and yet they made me feel like a villain for setting boundaries. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice firm, "but I'm not giving you any more money. I've done enough." Olivia didn't argue. She just went silent for a few seconds before saying, "Fine." Then she hung up. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed she was just upset and would get over it in a day or two. But I had no idea that phone call was the beginning of something much worse. That night, I went to bed early, feeling drained from the argument. I had no idea that while I was sleeping peacefully in my own home, my sister and my parents were plotting against me. At some point in the middle of the night, they broke into my room. Olivia took my phone from the nightstand while my parents rummaged through my office, stealing my business credit cards. They worked quickly and quietly, knowing exactly what they were looking for. They weren't just stealing from me. They were emptying my hard-earned money for their own greed. They transferred $60,000 from my account to Olivia's, covering their tracks as best they could before disappearing into the night. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they booked themselves a luxurious vacation to Italy. I had no idea any of this had happened. I slept through it all, completely unaware that my own family had stabbed me in the back. The next morning, I woke up later than usual, my head pounding. Maybe it was the stress of the argument the night before, but I felt heavier than usual, sluggish and uneasy. I reached for my phone, but it wasn't there. I frowned, sitting up and checking my nightstand. Nothing. That's when my landline rang. "Luna Carter?" A professional voice said on the other end. "Yes, who is this?" I asked, rubbing my temples. "This is Alex from First National Bank. We're calling regarding several large transactions made from your business account overnight." My stomach dropped. "What transactions?" "Multiple transfers were made, totaling $60,000, the banker explained. "We noticed that they were directed to an account under the name Olivia Carter. We wanted to confirm if these were authorized." I felt my entire body go numb.
No.
"No, I did not authorize any of that." The banker hesitated. "Would you like us to freeze your accounts?"
Yes.
"Do it now." I snapped, panic flooding my veins. I hung up and rushed to my office, searching for my business credit cards. They were gone. Then I realized something worse. My phone was missing too. A creeping sense of horror crawled up my spine. My own family. Olivia, my parents, they wouldn't.
Would they?
I ran to my laptop, my hand shaking as I logged into Instagram. And there it was. The ultimate betrayal, displayed for the world to see. Olivia, wearing expensive sunglasses, holding up a glass of champagne in a high-end restaurant. The caption read, "Italy, baby. Living the good life. Thanks for the upgrade, Luna." My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled down, seeing pictures of my parents at a luxury boutique, smiling like they had won the lottery. Expensive hotels, fine dining, shopping sprees, it was all there. They didn't just steal from me. They were celebrating it. Then, as if to twist the knife deeper, a text message popped up on my laptop screen. "Olivia, thanks for the credit card, sis. Wish you were here." Not really. I felt rage boil inside me. They thought they could do this to me and walk away without consequences? They thought I was weak. They had no idea who they were messing with. I took a deep breath, my jaw tightening as I grabbed my landline phone. First, I called my lawyer. Then I called the police. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to make them pay. And this time, there would be no second chances. I sat there, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding, my breath uneven, but my mind had never been clearer. They thought they could get away with this. They thought I would sit back and let them enjoy the fruits of my hard work while I suffered in silence. They were wrong. The first call I made was to my lawyer, James Wright. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and steady, just as I needed it to be. "Luna, what's wrong?" he asked, immediately sensing the urgency. "They stole from me, James," I said, my voice cold. "Olivia and my parents. They took my business credit cards, my phone, and transferred $60,000 to Olivia's account. They're in Italy right now, spending my money, flaunting it on social media like it's a game." There was a pause, then a low sigh. "That's serious. Do you have proof?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity of the question. "Oh, I have more than enough. Bank records, missing cards, and their Instagram posts basically confessing to the crime. Olivia even texted me, thanking me for my gift." "That's more than enough to take legal action," he said, his tone firm. "First, we'll freeze Olivia's bank account. Then we'll move forward with fraud charges. I'll also notify the federal authorities since the crime involves international transactions. This won't just be a civil case, Luna. They could face criminal charges." I exhaled, finally feeling a sliver of control returning. "Good. Do whatever it takes." "Understood," James said. "One more thing. I need you to stay calm. Don't reach out to them. Let them think they've won. The moment they suspect something, they might try to run or hide the money." I swallowed the anger bubbling inside me, forcing myself to nod even though he couldn't see me. "I won't do anything rash." After hanging up, I made my second call to the bank. Within minutes, Olivia's account was frozen. Whatever money she hadn't spent, yet was locked away, untouchable. It was small satisfaction, but I knew it was only the beginning. Then I waited. It wasn't easy. Every hour that passed felt like torture, knowing that they were still out there, enjoying my money, living a life they didn't earn. But I kept my promise. I stayed silent, watching from the shadows as my case against them built up like a storm waiting to break. 3 days later, James called me with an update. "The federal authorities are officially involved," he said. "They've issued an international arrest warrant. Italian police will be notified soon." I felt my stomach tighten. How soon is soon? "They could be arrested within the next 48 hours, James said. "We have enough evidence to ensure they won't get out of this easily." For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to smile. 2 days later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The moment I answered, I recognized the voice. "Luna," Olivia said, her voice sharp with panic. "What the hell did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, my tone flat. "Oh, I don't know, Olivia. Maybe you should tell me. I'm curious, how's Italy?" She ignored my sarcasm. "My bank account is frozen. I can't access my money." And she hesitated, her voice dropping. "There are police officers outside our hotel." I grinned. "Interesting. Sounds like a problem, Olivia." "You set us up," she shrieked. "You." I interrupted her. "I didn't set you up. You did this to yourself. You stole from me, Olivia. You thought you were clever, but you left a trail so obvious that even a child could have solved this case." She started to say something, but I cut her off again. "By the way, don't expect me to bail you out. You made your choice. Now live with it." Before she could reply, I hung up. It wasn't long before the real fun began. Just a few hours later, news broke. Olivia and my parents had been arrested in Italy. They were taken into custody at their luxury hotel, handcuffed in front of dozens of tourists and staff. Witnesses later described how Olivia screamed and tried to resist, how my mother burst into tears, and how my father, the ever-proud man, was left standing silent and humiliated. It was everything they deserved. I saw the news through social media first. People had recorded videos of the arrest, and the clips quickly spread. My sister, once so confident and smug, was now a pathetic mess, sobbing as police escorted her away. My parents looked just as pitiful, their entitled expressions wiped clean by sheer terror. They thought they were untouchable. They weren't. I watched those videos over and over again, each time feeling a little lighter, a little stronger. This was justice, not just for the money they stole, but for all the times they made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I owed them my success. Later that evening, my lawyer called again. "It's done," James said. "They're being processed as we speak. Italian authorities are working with U.S. officials to extradite them back home. Given the amount they stole, they're facing serious charges. Fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized financial transactions to start." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "And what's next?" James hesitated. "They might try to reach out to you. They'll beg, they'll apologize. But if I were you, Luna, I wouldn't listen." I chuckled. "Oh, I won't." Sure enough, that night, I received an unknown call. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. It was my mother. "Luna, sweetheart," she began, her voice trembling. We made a mistake. We never meant to hurt you. Please, you have to help us. We're your family. We're sorry, Luna. Please, don't let this happen to us." I deleted the message without a second thought. Then came another voicemail. Olivia, desperate and furious all at once. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think this is over? You're nothing without us, Luna. Nothing. You'll regret this." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because she was wrong. For the first time in my life, I was finally free. And they were the ones who would live with regret. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with the weight of my family's demands pressing down on me. There were no guilt-tripping messages, no last-minute pleas for money, no passive-aggressive remarks about how I owed them everything. No. This time, they were the ones scrambling, and I was the one watching from a distance. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, letting the warmth sink into my hands as I stared at the city skyline. I replayed Olivia's voicemail in my head, her voice switching from desperate to venomous in a matter of seconds. She was furious that I had done this to her, as if she hadn't done it to herself. They thought they could steal from me, humiliate me, and walk away untouched. They underestimated me. I checked my phone, scrolling through the latest updates from my lawyer. James had sent me a brief report. Olivia and my parents were still in custody, facing multiple charges: fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized financial transactions. It was all there in black and white. They wouldn't be getting out anytime soon. A part of me expected to feel guilty. This was my family, after all. But as I stared at their mugshots, all I felt was satisfaction. Olivia's face was contorted with anger, my mother looked like she had been crying, and my father, well, for once in his life, he had nothing to say. I went about my day like normal, checking in with my business, meeting with my team, and continuing to live my life without them. But in the back of my mind, I knew they weren't done trying. They would reach out again. They would try to manipulate me just like they always had. And I was right. Later that evening, my phone rang. This time, it was an international number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, I had another message waiting. I sighed, pressing play. It was my mother again, her voice shaky. Luna, we've been in here for days. We can't stay in here, honey. It's awful. Olivia is losing her mind. Your father hasn't spoken in hours. Please, please, just drop the charges. We're your family. We made a mistake, but we didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at the phone, my expression blank. I had heard it all before. The pleas, the fake remorse. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. A few minutes later, another voicemail. This time, it was Olivia. You think you're so smart, don't you? She spat, her voice full of venom. You think you've won? You're pathetic, Luna. You're just a miserable, selfish B***TCH who's too greedy to help her own family. Enjoy your little victory while you can. Because one day you'll need us. And when that day comes, we won't be there. I laughed. As if I ever needed them. I didn't respond. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded both voicemails to James. They're getting desperate, he said when he called me later. Which is a good thing. It means they know they're out of options. What happens next? I asked. The charges are moving forward, he explained. They'll be extradited back to the US soon. Olivia's bank account is still frozen, and the money will be returned to you. But they're facing serious legal consequences. If convicted, they could be looking at several years in prison. I exhaled, feeling the tension in my body slowly unwind. Good. They might try to negotiate, James warned. Their lawyers could offer a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. It's up to you if you want to accept it. I thought about it for a moment. A plea deal would mean less time behind bars for them, but it would also mean they admitted to their crimes. I want them to pay, I said finally. But I don't want this dragging on for years. If a plea deal guarantees they face consequences, I'll consider it. James agreed to handle it. And so I waited. A few days later, the call came. They've agreed to a deal, James said. Olivia and your parents will avoid prison, but they'll have to pay back every cent they stole. On top of that, Olivia will have a criminal record, and your parents' assets will be seized to help repay the debt. I smiled. It was perfect. My family had spent their entire lives using me as their personal bank. Now, they would spend the rest of their lives struggling to pay me back. It was poetic justice. That night, I received one final voicemail. It was my father this time, his voice heavy and tired. Luna, he said. We lost everything. Your mother is devastated. Olivia, I don't even recognize her anymore. This isn't what we wanted. I listened, waiting for him to say what I already knew was coming. We were wrong, he admitted. We should have never taken from you. But you have to understand, we thought you would always be there for us. We thought family meant something. I closed my eyes, shaking my head. Family did mean something. But not this. Not betrayal. Not greed. Not entitlement. I deleted the message. I had nothing left to say to them. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about my family less and less. The rage, the betrayal, the pain, it was all fading into the background, replaced by something far stronger. Peace. Relief. Freedom. For years, I had convinced myself that I needed them. That no matter how much they used me, manipulated me, or made me feel like I was never enough, I had to hold on. Because they were my family. Because that's what family does. But family doesn't steal from you. They don't lie. They don't treat you like an ATM. And they don't celebrate your downfall when you finally say enough. I was done with them. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding my life on my own terms. I redecorated my apartment, changing everything that reminded me of them. I took a vacation, a real one, not stolen, not filled with guilt. I worked on my business with more energy than I had in years, focusing on me for the first time in a long time. Meanwhile, Olivia and my parents were struggling. The plea deal had forced them into a new reality, one where they had to pay back every cent they stole. Olivia had lost her fancy apartment, My parents' retirement funds were drained, and whatever luxury they had once enjoyed was gone. Occasionally, I would hear updates through mutual acquaintances. Olivia had tried to find a job, but with a criminal record, no company wanted to take a risk on her. My mother had been completely humiliated within her social circle, no longer able to brag about her successful daughters when everyone knew she had stolen from one. My father, always so proud, had withdrawn completely, his ego shattered beyond repair. They had built their lives on my success. Now that I was gone, they had nothing. I never answered their calls again. I never responded to their texts. Even when they tried to send messages through friends, "Luna, they're struggling. Maybe you should let it go." I refused to entertain it. Let it go? After what they did? No. They had made their choices. Now they had to live with them. A month later, my lawyer, James, called with a final update. "They've started making payments," he said, amusement in his voice. "It's slow, but it's happening. They'll be repaying you for years at this rate." I smirked. "Good. I doubt they'll ever recover fully," James added. "They relied on you too much, and without your money, their lifestyle collapsed. But you came out of this stronger, Luna. Not a lot of people could have handled this the way you did." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. I guess I just finally realized my own worth. The truth was, I didn't need revenge anymore. That part of me, the part that wanted to see them suffer, had disappeared. Not because I forgave them, not because I felt sorry for them, but because they didn't matter anymore. They were nothing more than a closed chapter in my life. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto my balcony, looking over the city. The air felt lighter. The silence felt calm, not lonely. For the first time in years, I belonged to myself. No more guilt. No more obligation. No more being used. Just me. And that was enough. I raised my glass to the night sky, whispering a final goodbye to the past. Then, I turned and walked back inside, ready for whatever came next. The end. My cruel parents treated me like a stepdaughter. At my grandma's funeral, the lawyer read the will. I inherited all $150 million, while they got nothing. My younger brother's face turned red with rage. "Give me the money for my business, or I'll ruin your life," he threatened. I stayed calm, smiled, and handed them a bag. "Here's what you deserve." They opened it, their faces twisting in horror. My mother collapsed, my father went pale, and my brother screamed. Tears streamed down their faces. I just laughed and walked away. I never truly understood what it meant to be invisible until I became a part of my own family. From the moment I was old enough to recognize love and favoritism, I knew I would always come second to my younger brother, Liam. No matter what I did, how hard I worked, or how much I achieved, it was never enough. Liam was the golden child, the one my parents worshipped, while I was just there. Growing up in New York, our family lived in luxury. My father, Charles Reynolds, had built a respectable business, and my mother, Margaret, took pride in flaunting our wealth at extravagant social gatherings. But despite all the money, I never felt rich. Not in love, not in appreciation. Liam, on the other hand, was treated like royalty. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. If he failed at school, it was because the teachers were unfair. If he got into trouble, it was because his friends had led him astray. If he wasted money, it was because he deserved to enjoy life. But me? I was expected to be perfect, to be responsible, to fix the problems he created. I spent my teenage years drowning in expectations, excelling in academics, pushing myself beyond limits, all in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally see me. But they never did. The moment Liam showed even the smallest interest in something, all attention shifted to him. And when I got my degree in finance and landed a prestigious job as a financial analyst, my parents barely acknowledged it. My mother's only response was, "That's nice, dear. But did you hear? Liam is considering opening his own business." Liam, the one who had never held a real job, never taken life seriously, was suddenly planning a business? I knew right then that my parents would do whatever it took to fund him, even if it meant draining every last cent of their money. But what I didn't expect was my grandfather's decision. Henry Whitmore was a self-made billionaire, a man who had worked hard for everything he had. Unlike my parents, he never believed in handing out wealth to those who didn't earn it. He had always been kind to me, a quiet support system in a family that barely acknowledged my existence. When he passed away, I mourned him deeply, but nothing could have prepared me for the news that followed. In his will, my grandfather left his entire $150 million fortune to me. Not a cent to my parents. Not a penny to Liam. Everything was mine. The moment the lawyer announced it, the room fell into a deafening silence. My mother turned pale, my father clenched his fists, and Liam looked at me like I had stolen something from him. His face twisted in disbelief and rage, as if the very idea that I was worthy of such an inheritance was absurd. "This has to be a mistake," my father muttered, his voice dangerously low. "Dad wouldn't do this." But he had. He had seen what I had gone through, he had recognized my efforts, and in his final act, he had chosen me over them. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally seen. Of course, my parents weren't going to accept this. They didn't yell, didn't throw a fit, not right away. Instead, they played their roles perfectly. My mother wept, talking about how the family was in deep financial trouble, how the business had suffered losses, how my father was struggling. "Barbara, we're drowning," she pleaded, her voice trembling. Liam's business plans were our last hope. Liam didn't speak at first. He just stared at me with cold, calculating eyes. And then, in the softest voice I had ever heard him use, he said, "You wouldn't abandon your own family, would you?" And just like that, I fell into their trap. I had spent my entire life trying to win my parents' love, to prove that I was worthy of their affection. So when they begged me for help, I convinced myself that this was my chance. Maybe this time, if I did the right thing, they would finally love me the way they loved Liam. So I gave in. I handed over the entire inheritance, believing every word they said about financial troubles and drowning debt. I signed away every last dollar, thinking I was saving my family. And for a brief moment, I thought I had done the right thing. But that illusion shattered quickly. Months passed and nothing changed, except for the fact that my parents and Liam were richer than ever. They bought new mansions, sports cars, designer clothes, taking lavish vacations while I continued working day and night, struggling to build my own life. There was no debt, no financial struggle. They had lied to me. The final blow came when I overheard a conversation between Liam and one of his shady business associates. He had been laundering money through illegal real estate deals, making dirty profits while pretending to be a struggling entrepreneur. He had used my inheritance as a cover for his crimes, and my parents had willingly played along. That was the moment I realized I wasn't their daughter. I was their pawn. Rage simmered inside me, deeper than I had ever felt before. I had spent my life trying to earn love from people who saw me as nothing more than a financial asset. And I was done. That night, I made a decision. I was going to take everything back. I didn't care what it took, didn't care what lines I had to cross. Liam stole from me. My parents used me. And now it was my turn to play the game. So I packed my bags, left the house, and never looked back. I knew they wouldn't stop me. Not until they needed more money. And when that moment came, they would learn the truth. The daughter they ignored, the one they manipulated and stole from, she wasn't weak anymore. She was coming for them. Walking away from my family should have felt liberating, but in the beginning, it felt like I had lost everything. For years, I had allowed myself to believe that if I just kept giving, if I kept proving my worth, they would finally love me the way they loved Liam. But that was nothing more than a fantasy. The reality was harsh. I had been used, manipulated, and discarded the moment I had nothing left to give. I moved to Los Angeles, determined to rebuild my life from scratch. With my experience as a financial analyst, I found a good job, one that paid well enough to support me. But even as I tried to move forward, the anger never left me. Every time I thought about the millions I had handed over so blindly, about the lies, the deceit, the betrayal, it burned inside me. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't let them get away with it. Liam had built his empire on fraud and corruption, using my inheritance to fund his illegal activities. My parents had enabled him, spending my grandfather's money like it was their personal reward for years of neglecting me. And they had laughed behind my back, celebrating their victory while I struggled.
No.
They weren't going to walk away unscathed. I started with research. If I was going to destroy them, I needed to understand exactly how deep their corruption ran. I had a few contacts from my years in finance, people who had seen firsthand the dirty side of business. Through them, I found out Liam's real estate ventures were more than just risky investments. He was involved in money laundering, tax evasion, and shady land deals with criminal organizations. That was all I needed to hear. I reached out to Detective Morgan, a private investigator with a reputation for exposing financial fraud. He was skeptical at first, but when I provided him with the initial documents I had gathered, he took immediate interest. "You're telling me your brother has been using your inheritance as a front for laundering money?" he asked, flipping through the files. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "And my parents have been covering for him. They convinced me to hand over my grandfather's money, but it was never about saving the family. It was about funding Liam's crimes." Morgan leaned back, studying me. "And why come forward now?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because I want to see them fall. Every last one of them." From that day forward, we worked in silence. For months, Morgan and I built a case against Liam. He had connections that allowed us to dig deeper, uncovering transactions Liam thought were well hidden. Offshore accounts, fake property sales, forged documents. It was all there, buried beneath layers of deception. Meanwhile, I played my role perfectly. I pretended to forgive them. I called my parents one evening, keeping my voice soft, hesitant, just the way they liked me to be. "Mom, Dad, I miss you," I said, forcing a small sniff. I know things have been rough, but I don't want to lose my family over money." Margaret gasped, and I could almost hear her excitement. "Oh, sweetheart, we miss you too. We were just talking about how much we regret what happened."
Lies.
But I let her talk. "Come visit us," my father added. "Let's talk in person, like a real family." A real family? What a joke. But I agreed, and a week later, I flew back to New York, walking into the home I had once called mine. Everything about it felt different. I wasn't the same girl they had controlled all those years. This time, I wasn't here to beg for love. I was here to take everything back. Liam greeted me with his usual arrogance, flashing a smirk like he had already won. "Finally coming back to your senses, sis?" I smiled at him. Something like that. Over the next few weeks, I played my part flawlessly. I sat through their conversations, nodding along as they talked about how difficult things had been since I left. They never once apologized, never once acknowledged what they had done to me. Instead, they treated me like a child returning after a tantrum. It was disgusting. But I stayed patient because I knew what was coming. One night, Liam brought up a business opportunity. "I've got something big coming up," he said, swirling his drink lazily. "An exclusive deal, but I need investors. Since you're back, maybe we can work something out." I acted hesitant. "I don't know, Liam. I just started saving up again." Margaret leaned in, placing a hand over mine. "Oh, sweetheart, don't be selfish. We're family. We always look out for each other, right?" That was rich coming from her. And just like that, Liam walked straight into my trap. He offered me a fake investment deal, promising high returns. He gave me documents to sign, legal papers, except they weren't in his name. They were in mine. The fool actually thought he could use me as a scapegoat if things went south. I signed them without hesitation. What he didn't know was that every paper I signed had been modified by Morgan. The deal wasn't just fake, it was illegal. The money being transferred? It wasn't going into an investment. It was going directly to an account flagged for fraudulent activity. Liam had just sealed his own fate. The night before the plan unfolded, I sat in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling. For years, I had dreamed of this moment. The day I would finally watch my family crumble, just as they had watched me suffer. I had loved them once. I had given them everything. And they had thrown me away. But tomorrow, I would no longer be the daughter they used. Tomorrow, I would be the reason for their destruction. The morning everything fell apart for my family, I woke up feeling strangely calm. I had spent months planning this, carefully setting every piece in place, ensuring there was no way out for them. And now, all that was left to do was watch the inevitable destruction unfold. I sat at the breakfast table with my parents and Liam, listening to them talk about their next vacation to Europe, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Margaret was gushing about the latest designer brands she wanted to buy, while Charles sipped his coffee like a man without a single worry in the world. Liam, ever the arrogant fool, was scrolling through his phone, checking the fake investment deal he thought he had trapped me in. He had no idea that every move he had made had been traced, documented, and handed over to the authorities. The knock at the door came right on time. My mother glanced up, frowning slightly. "Are we expecting anyone?" Charles barely looked up. "Probably another delivery." It wasn't a delivery. The moment he opened the door, federal agents flooded into the house, guns drawn, voices sharp as they barked out orders. "Liam Reynolds, you are under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion." Liam's chair scraped against the floor as he jumped up, his face pale, his arrogance crumbling in an instant. What the hell is this?" Agents swarmed in, pinning him against the wall, slapping cuffs onto his wrists. My mother screamed, rushing forward, but another officer stopped her. "Ma'am, stay where you are." "What's happening?" This must be some mistake. My father's voice cracked, his usual commanding tone laced with panic. I stood up slowly, placing my coffee cup down with deliberate ease. And then, for the first time in my life, I looked at them with complete indifference. "There's no mistake," I said, watching the horror dawn on their faces. "Liam's been laundering money for years. And now, it's all caught up to him." Liam whipped his head toward me, his eyes wide with betrayal. You really thought you could trap me in an illegal deal and use me as your scapegoat?" I tilted my head, feigning amusement. "You should have been more careful with your paperwork, Liam." His expression twisted into one of pure rage. "You set me up?" I stepped closer, my voice icy and controlled. "I didn't set you up, Liam. You did this to yourself. I just made sure the right people saw it." He lunged toward me, but the agents tightened their grip, shoving him toward the door. "You're going to pay for this, Barbara," he snarled. "You think you're so smart? You think you can do this to your own family?" I smiled. "Watch me." As the agents dragged him outside, I turned to face my parents. Margaret was shaking, clutching her chest like she had been stabbed. "Barbara, please, you have to fix this." Charles looked ready to explode, his face red with fury. Do something. Do something?" I repeated, laughing softly. "Like what? Cover up your son's crimes? Pay off the authorities? I'm afraid you're out of money, Dad." My father froze, the realization hitting him like a freight train. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. "Oh, did I forget to mention?" I said sweetly. "You signed over all your assets to me." My mother blinked. "What?" I opened the folder, flipping through the documents. "The papers you signed? The ones you thought were for a loan? They were actually ownership transfer agreements. This house, your bank accounts, your stocks, they're all mine now." My father stumbled back, his breath coming out in short gasps.
No.
"No, this isn't possible." Margaret let out a strangled sob. "Barbara, we're your parents. You can't just take everything from us." I shrugged. "Why not? You took everything from me." And then, to seal their fate, I made one final move. I walked to the door, where the lead agent stood, watching the scene unfold. "By the way," I said, turning to him, "you might want to look into my parents' bank records. I have reason to believe they've been funneling money into offshore accounts." The officer nodded, already pulling out his radio. "We'll be looking into that." My mother let out a wail, falling to her knees. "No, you can't do this to us." I stepped past them, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor, the same floor I had once walked on as a forgotten daughter, a pawn, a fool who thought love could be bought. But not anymore. As I walked out the door, I glanced back one last time, my voice calm, final. "This house will be foreclosed by the end of the week," I said. "I'd start packing if I were you." And with that, I walked away. For good. I never looked back as I walked away from that house, the same house where I had spent years being overlooked, mistreated, and used. This time, I wasn't leaving as the desperate daughter hoping for approval. I was walking away as the one who had won. For the first time in my life, I was free. Liam was gone, thrown into the back of a federal vehicle, his fate sealed by his own greed and stupidity. He had played a dangerous game and lost, and I had made sure of it. My parents, once so powerful, so confident, had been reduced to two pathetic, broken people begging for mercy. It was poetic justice, really. They had taken everything from me, and now I had taken everything from them. I left New York that night, boarding a flight back to Los Angeles, without telling a single person. There was no reason to stay. I had done what I came to do. My past was in ruins, but my future had never looked brighter. The months that followed were quiet, peaceful even. For the first time, I didn't have to answer to anyone. I focused on my career, investing wisely, building my own success, not the kind handed down from inheritance, but the kind earned through intelligence and hard work. This time, everything I had was mine. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about my family. Their fall had been swift and brutal. Without Liam's illegal dealings funneling money into their accounts, my parents had lost everything. The banks seized the assets, the house was auctioned off, and they were left with nothing. The last I heard, Charles and Margaret were living in a cramped rental apartment on the outskirts of the city, surviving off whatever savings they had left before it, too, ran dry. I didn't feel sorry for them. Liam, as expected, had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The trial was quick. The evidence was overwhelming. Money laundering, tax fraud, illegal dealings. He had dug his own grave, and now he had no way out. I didn't attend the trial. There was no point. I imagined him sitting in his cell, thinking about how the sister he had always mocked and used was the one who destroyed him. I wondered if he regretted it. But knowing Liam, he was probably still blaming me, convinced that I had been the villain in his story. That was fine, because I wasn't his sister anymore. 5 years passed before I saw them again. It wasn't planned. I had long since moved on, built a new life for myself, surrounded by people who actually respected me. I had attended networking events, expanded my business portfolio, and found genuine happiness. I had almost forgotten them, until they showed up. It happened on a rainy evening in Los Angeles. I had just finished a dinner meeting when I heard a voice behind me. "Barbara." I turned, slowly, and there they were, Charles and Margaret, barely recognizable. Their once pristine designer clothes were gone, replaced by cheap, worn-out jackets and faded jeans. Margaret's once perfect hair was dull, unkempt. My father, once a man who walked with his head high, now looked old, tired, defeated. I should have felt something. Pity, anger, sadness. But all I felt was nothing. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice hoarse. I crossed my arms. "About what?" Margaret reached out like she was about to touch me, but I stepped back. She had lost that right a long time ago. "Barbara, please," she whispered. We made mistakes. But we're family. We need your help." There it was. The desperation. The last act of a play that had long since ended. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at them, taking in the sight of these two people who had once controlled my life, stolen from me, discarded me. And now, they had nothing. They were nothing. "Help," I repeated slowly. "You want my help?" Margaret nodded quickly. "We've been struggling. After everything that happened with Liam, with the house." I cut her off. "You mean after everything you did?" Silence. Charles cleared his throat. "Barbara, we just need a little money to get back on our feet. Nothing much. We know you've been doing well, and we thought—" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You thought I'd just hand it over? Just like I did before?" Margaret flinched. She knew. She knew exactly what she had done. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I tilted my head. "Are you? Or are you just sorry that you lost?" Neither of them had an answer. And in that moment, I realized something. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for another chance to use me. 5 years had passed, but they hadn't changed. They were still the same people, still looking for someone to clean up their mess. And I was still just their last resort. I stepped forward, close enough that they could see the coldness in my eyes. You made your choices. You gambled with your lives, your money, your son's future. And now, you're paying the price. My mother let out a broken sob. But were your parents? No, I said, my voice sharp final. You're just two people who happened to give birth to me. The rain poured harder, drenching them as they stood there, waiting, hoping for some sliver of kindness. But I had none left to give. I turned, walking away without another word. I didn't look back. This time, I knew I never would. At my sister's birthday party, when I arrived, all the seats were taken. My family humiliated me, saying outsiders should sit on the floor. My mom coldly said, "If you want us to welcome you into our family, then pay the $8,000 bill." Calmly, I placed a folded paper down and left. 30 minutes later, they called in panic. I laughed because the paper I'd left behind was actually their worst nightmare. My name is Alicia Carter, and I'm 27 years old. I'm a nurse living in Austin, Texas. To anyone looking from outside, my life might seem perfectly normal, an independent woman with a stable career. But if they only knew the truth hidden behind my forced smiles and the loneliness behind closed doors, they'd be shocked. For as long as I could remember, I had struggled to gain the respect and acceptance of my own family. My mother, Linda Carter, is 56 years old and a homemaker. But more than that, she's a woman who thrives on making me feel small. My elder sister, Jessica, is even worse. At 31, she's a successful real estate agent, confident, charming to strangers, and cruel to me. Together, they formed a team that seemed dedicated to tearing down any shred of self-esteem I had. My father, Robert, now 58 and a retired military officer, was never the type to get involved in family issues. He always remained indifferent, silent, choosing to ignore the emotional chaos in our house. He thought of himself as neutral, but by never protecting me, he unknowingly allowed Jessica and my mother to grow bolder in their abuse. Jessica's husband, Derek Reynolds, a 34-year-old bank manager, was no better. He seemed pleasant on the surface, but silently supported Jessica in every humiliation she threw my way, never once defending me. It was as though everyone in my family found comfort in belittling me. From an early age, my mother and sister criticized everything I did. They mocked my cooking, laughed at my homemaking skills, and dismissed every accomplishment I ever achieved. When I graduated from nursing school, my mother simply said, "Oh, nurses aren't real doctors," while Jessica joked that maybe now I'd finally learn how to take care of people properly. Over the years, their insults turned into a carefully orchestrated campaign to ruin my reputation among neighbors and friends. Jessica enjoyed spreading lies, telling people how irresponsible and unreliable I was, damaging friendships before they could even form. Every day felt exhausting. My family's toxic words echoed in my ears, making even simple tasks feel impossible. Things finally reached a breaking point on Jessica's 31st birthday. She planned a lavish party at an upscale restaurant in downtown Austin. I was hesitant about attending, knowing I'd likely be the target of their mockery yet again. But Jessica personally called me, insisting sweetly, saying how important it was for me to be there. Against my instincts, I agreed, hoping foolishly that maybe things would be different this time. I chose my best dress, a deep blue gown I had saved for special occasions, and arrived at the restaurant precisely on time. My heart sank the moment I entered the elegant hall. The atmosphere was festive, music and laughter filled the air, and beautifully dressed guests mingled cheerfully. However, I immediately noticed one thing. Every seat was already taken. Confused, I stood awkwardly near the entrance, trying to spot Jessica. Suddenly, I heard her familiar voice behind me, dripping with mockery. "Look who finally made it. Sorry, Alicia. There seems to be no seat left for outsiders." My face flushed with embarrassment as everyone turned to look. I tried to force a laugh, but my heart raced painfully. My mother approached from behind Jessica, smiling coldly, clearly amused by my discomfort. "Jessica's right, Alicia. Family deserves a place at the table. Outsiders, well, the floor suits them," my mother said loudly, drawing laughter from nearby guests. Humiliation burned through me. My father stood nearby, silent as always, his gaze distant. Derek smirked quietly, clearly entertained by the spectacle. My humiliation seemed to be the main attraction of the evening. Feeling my courage crumble, I forced myself to stay calm and asked softly, "Why did you invite me if this was your plan all along?" Jessica laughed again, louder this time, ensuring everyone heard. "We thought maybe you'd finally want to prove your worth, Alicia," she said. "If you want us to accept you into this family, then you can start by paying tonight's bill. Just a little token of your sincerity." My mother nodded in agreement, her eyes cold and calculating. "Yes, Alicia. Pay the bill. It's just $8,000. Surely, proving your worth isn't too expensive." My mind spun in disbelief. They had always been cruel, but this was a new low. They wanted me to pay thousands of dollars just to be recognized as family? Anger rose up within me, burning away years of self-doubt and submission. I took a deep breath, suddenly calm. I reached into my purse, pulled out a neatly folded paper, placed it silently on the table in front of them, and looked directly at Jessica. "You'll regret this," I said softly but firmly. Turning around, I walked confidently out of the restaurant, feeling their confused and startled eyes on me as I left. 30 minutes later, as I sat quietly in my car, my phone rang repeatedly. Ignoring the frantic calls, I finally answered after the 6th attempt. Jessica's voice was panicked, completely different from her earlier arrogance. "Alicia, what did you do?" she shouted. In the background, I could hear voices yelling angrily. A calm smile spread across my lips, and I said gently, "Did you finally read that paper I left behind?" "What was it?" Jessica demanded desperately. "It was your arrest warrant," I replied coldly. "You and Mom have gone too far this time." Jessica went silent, and I ended the call. For the first time, I felt powerful. My family had underestimated me, never imagining I could fight back. But their humiliation had sparked something new inside me. I was done being their victim. But this was only the beginning. I wasn't going to stop here. I intended to reclaim my life, dignity, and pride. I would make sure they all understood the pain they had caused, and they would finally pay for their betrayal. Sitting alone in my apartment that night, I replayed the scene at the restaurant over and over in my mind. The humiliation I'd endured for years finally felt like a heavy chain slipping off my shoulders. For the first time, I'd fought back, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd always tolerated their abuse, hoping they'd someday recognize my worth, but tonight I had drawn a clear line. My family had pushed me too far, and I couldn't go back. The folded paper I'd left wasn't actually an arrest warrant. Not exactly. It was a carefully prepared legal document detailing evidence of Jessica's shady real estate practices. I'd been quietly gathering information for months, ever since I discovered by accident that my sister had been inflating property values and deceiving her clients to maximize her commissions. I'd never intended to expose her, believing that family loyalty was more important. But after tonight, loyalty had vanished. As I sat quietly on my couch, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother, Linda. My heart sank. Reluctantly, I answered, bracing myself for her fury. "Alicia," she screamed without even saying hello. "What have you done?" "Jessica's in trouble with the restaurant. They called the police. You have to fix this right now." I took a deep breath. "I didn't do anything, Mom. Jessica made her own choices. I simply decided I wasn't going to be humiliated anymore." My mother's voice shook with anger. "Do you realize what you've done to your sister? She could lose her job. People are watching us. We're being humiliated." Suddenly, something snapped inside me. "Now you know how it feels," I replied, my voice steady. "You've both humiliated me for years. laughed at my pain, and ruined friendships before they could even start. What makes you think I owe you any loyalty now? There was silence on the other end, heavy and tense. Finally, my mother said coldly, "You'll regret this, Alicia. You'll regret turning against family." I ended the call, without another word. She'd said that many times before, but this time it didn't scare me. It only strengthened my resolve to stand up for myself. In the days that followed, the consequences of that night unfolded rapidly. Jessica's employer started an internal investigation into her real estate practices. News traveled fast, and soon Jessica's carefully built professional image started crumbling. Clients she'd misled began openly criticizing her, some even threatening legal action. Her reputation, built meticulously over years, unraveled within a matter of days. My mother was equally frantic. She repeatedly called, leaving angry, threatening voicemails, accusing me of destroying the family. My father, typically passive, tried calling once but gave up quickly. Derek, my brother-in-law, attempted to intervene, but I refused to respond. I wasn't interested in their explanations or apologies. I had finally realized that standing up for myself was more important than keeping toxic relationships alive. Meanwhile, I focused on taking back control of my life. For so long, I'd let their words shape my self-esteem, but now I was determined to rebuild myself. I reached out to some neighbors and old friends who'd distanced themselves, cautiously explaining the truth. To my surprise, most of them listened, shocked by how deeply my family had manipulated them. One afternoon, my neighbor Emma, a kind woman I'd always liked, came by my apartment. "Alicia," she said gently, "I never imagined your family could treat you so terribly. I believed Jessica and your mom because they always seemed so confident. I'm sorry I never questioned their lies." Her sincere words warmed my heart, and tears filled my eyes. For the first time, I felt seen and understood. Emma's visit encouraged others, and soon neighbors I'd never properly known began reaching out, offering support. Each conversation slowly repaired the damage Jessica and my mother had inflicted upon my reputation. Meanwhile, Jessica's downfall continued. She lost her prestigious real estate job, fired publicly due to her unethical behavior. News quickly spread across social media and local news, and her former clients publicly condemned her dishonesty. Jessica, who once thrived on humiliating others, was now experiencing humiliation firsthand. My mother tried desperately to defend Jessica, but nobody trusted her words anymore. My father remained distant as usual, perhaps realizing too late how much damage his silence had caused. Derek, embarrassed by Jessica's disgrace, began distancing himself, clearly unwilling to face the consequences alongside his wife. Then, unexpectedly, I received another call, this one from Jessica herself. Her voice was shaky, drained of the arrogance that once defined her. "Alicia, please," she begged quietly. "You have to help me. Everything's falling apart. I have nothing left." I paused, hearing desperation in her voice for the first time. Part of me felt sadness, but another part remembered the pain I'd endured. "Jessica," I replied calmly, "you created this mess by mistreating people, especially me. I didn't destroy your life. You destroyed your own. Goodbye." She cried out my name as I hung up, but I didn't waver. Jessica had used and manipulated me for far too long, and I refused to return to being a victim. Still, I knew this wasn't the end yet. My family wouldn't accept defeat so easily. They'd likely retaliate. I prepared myself emotionally, aware that I'd need to stay strong. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the weight of uncertainty and fear, but also the unfamiliar sensation of liberation. The Alicia who allowed herself to be humiliated was gone. I'd finally found my strength and refused to lose it again. But deep down, I knew the true test still lay ahead. My family was wounded and angry, their pride shattered. They wouldn't simply let me walk away victorious. I needed to be ready, because their next move might be their most ruthless yet. After Jessica's desperate call, my heart raced with anxiety. Deep down, I knew that the silence from my family wouldn't last. I had struck them at their core, humiliating Jessica publicly, exposing my mother's manipulative behavior and shattering their carefully constructed image. I knew retaliation was inevitable. I just didn't know what form it would take or when it would happen. For the next few weeks, every moment felt tense. Even though my neighbors and some old friends had begun to reconnect and support me, I still jumped every time my phone buzzed or when someone knocked at the door. I was emotionally exhausted but determined to hold my ground. One afternoon, while at work, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. The words were blunt and chilling. "You'll pay for destroying this family. Watch your back." I knew immediately it was Jessica or my mother. The threat rattled me, but I refused to show fear. I'd come too far to retreat now. Later that evening, when I arrived home, I discovered another disturbing surprise. Someone had vandalized my apartment door, writing "Traitor" in large red letters. My heart sank. They were escalating, clearly desperate to break my spirit. My hands shook as I called the police to report it, but I knew there wasn't enough proof to directly accuse my family yet. Still, I refused to be intimidated into silence. Determined to fight back, I decided to publicly share my story on social media. For the first time, I revealed years of emotional abuse, humiliation, and manipulation I'd faced at the hands of my mother and Jessica. I attached screenshots, text messages, and audio clips as evidence of their cruelty. Within hours, my post went viral among friends, colleagues, and strangers alike. Comments flooded in, most offering sympathy, support, and encouragement. I knew my family would see this exposure. And as expected, within hours, my mother called repeatedly. When I finally answered, her voice was frantic and bitter. "Alicia, how could you do this? You've ruined our family's reputation. Delete that immediately." My reply was calm yet firm. "Mom, you've already destroyed our family with your toxic behavior. I simply told the truth. I won't live in your shadow of lies anymore." She screamed something unintelligible before I ended the call. I felt stronger than ever, but deep inside, anxiety lingered. I was openly confronting them now, and that meant things could get worse before they got better. Days later, while working a late shift at the hospital, a co-worker named Sophia approached me nervously. "Alicia, someone came looking for you earlier today," she whispered cautiously. "It was your sister Jessica. She told some of your coworkers terrible things about you. I didn't believe it, of course, but be careful. She's trying to hurt you professionally." My heart sank again. Jessica was desperate, aiming to sabotage my career and undermine my credibility at work. Anger surged through me. I thanked Sophia for the warning, determined not to let Jessica destroy what I'd built for myself. I immediately informed my supervisor, Grace, who listened carefully as I explained everything: my family's emotional abuse, Jessica's professional sabotage attempts, and even the threats I'd received. Grace nodded sympathetically, assuring me of her full support. "We value you here, Alicia," she said firmly. "Your family's toxicity won't change that. We'll handle this together." Her support was comforting, yet I knew I couldn't wait passively. I hired a lawyer to help protect myself professionally and legally, ensuring Jessica couldn't do more harm. My lawyer immediately issued a restraining order against Jessica and my mother, forbidding them from coming near me or interfering in my life. My family reacted with outrage. Derek even called once, his voice hesitant but accusatory. "Alicia, isn't this going too far? Your family. Can't we fix this privately?" I laughed bitterly. "Derek, family doesn't hurt family intentionally. You were part of this, too, silent, supportive of Jessica's cruelty. I'm protecting myself now. It's too late to play the family card." He sighed heavily, sounding genuinely troubled. "I hope you know what you're doing," he muttered before hanging up. His vague warning made me uneasy, but I refused to back down now. Despite my courage, the emotional toll was heavy. I often cried myself to sleep, wishing things were different. Even though standing up for myself felt empowering, the reality of cutting ties with family still hurt deeply. Yet, amidst the turmoil, I discovered unexpected allies. My coworkers at the hospital stood by me openly, defending my reputation and dismissing Jessica's lies. Sophia and Grace, especially, became close friends, offering emotional support whenever doubts crept in. Their kindness and strength encouraged me, helping rebuild my self-esteem piece by piece. One evening, while sitting with Sophia after a shift, my phone lit up again, another unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered, preparing myself emotionally. To my surprise, it wasn't Jessica or my mother. It was a calm, authoritative voice. Alicia Carter? I'm Detective Ryan Collins from the Austin Police Department. We've received evidence regarding harassment and threats against you. Your sister, Jessica Carter, was brought in for questioning today. I exhaled sharply, emotions swirling. Relief mixed with nervousness filled me. Someone, maybe a neighbor or coworker, had reported my family's harassment to the police without my knowing. We take threats seriously, Detective Collins continued gently. Your sister denies everything, of course. But we have enough evidence. We'd like you to come in tomorrow to give an official statement. My heart pounded, and tears blurred my vision. After years of pain, humiliation, and fear, justice finally seemed within reach. Yet even as relief filled me, a deeper worry remained. Jessica wouldn't let this go easily. She'd fight fiercely to protect herself, and my mother wouldn't stay silent. I'd shaken their world, and now I had to face the consequences of standing up for myself, no matter how severe. The next morning, as I walked into the police station to meet Detective Collins, anxiety twisted inside my stomach. It felt surreal, almost like stepping into someone else's life. I never imagined that I'd have to involve the police against my own family, but they'd left me no choice. Detective Collins greeted me warmly, sensing my unease. He carefully walked me through the process as I gave my statement, detailing everything: the humiliation, threats, vandalism, and Jessica's attempt to sabotage my career. He listened patiently, occasionally nodding, his expression calm and reassuring. As I finished speaking, he paused briefly and then said, Alicia, your sister Jessica and mother Linda have crossed serious lines here. With the evidence we've collected, they could face criminal charges. Are you sure you want to proceed? For a moment, my emotions wavered. Memories flashed vividly in my mind, years of pain, humiliation, and tears. I took a deep breath, strengthening my resolve. Yes, I said firmly. They need to understand they can't treat people this way, not me or anyone else. The next few weeks felt intense and emotionally draining. Jessica and my mother were formally charged, Jessica for harassment, intimidation, and professional fraud, and my mother for aiding and threatening behavior. They hired lawyers immediately, denying every accusation publicly and privately, but the damage to their reputation was irreparable. The news spread quickly around Austin. Jessica's once thriving real estate career completely collapsed. No one trusted her anymore. Her former clients distanced themselves, openly condemning her unethical behavior. Jessica's arrogant pride had turned to desperation as her world crumbled around her. My mother faced similar consequences. Neighbors and former friends, having learned the truth, withdrew their support, leaving Linda socially isolated and disgraced. My father, Robert, feeling immense embarrassment, continued distancing himself further from the mess, finally acknowledging, albeit quietly, how his silence contributed to our broken family. Surprisingly, Derek chose to separate from Jessica amid the chaos, unwilling to endure further humiliation. He reached out to me one last time, apologizing weakly for not intervening earlier. I accepted his apology but remained distant. I was tired of weak apologies from people who had silently watched my suffering for years. Despite the turmoil, something remarkable was happening within me. I began feeling lighter, freer, stronger. Facing my family head-on had forced me to rediscover my worth. Sophia and Grace's friendship blossomed, providing emotional strength I'd never experienced before. Together, we spent weekends exploring Austin, sharing laughter and healing conversations. For the first time, I truly felt like I belonged somewhere, welcomed and appreciated just as I was. Months passed, and the legal battles finally ended. Jessica faced significant fines, community service, and probation. Her dreams of luxury and status were gone, replaced by constant reminders of her downfall. My mother avoided jail time, but was ordered to attend mandatory counseling and perform community service. Both were publicly humiliated, left with nothing but regrets. Eventually, Jessica appeared at my apartment unannounced. Standing on my doorstep, she looked fragile, completely unlike the arrogant sister who once tormented me. Tears filled her eyes and she whispered softly, "I'm sorry, Alicia. I've ruined everything. I never realized how cruel I was until now. Please forgive me." For a moment, I almost felt compassion. But years of suffering and betrayal couldn't vanish with a single apology. Calmly, I replied, "Jessica, I can't forgive you, not yet. Maybe someday, but right now, I'm still healing. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. Please respect that." Jessica nodded quietly, defeated, turning slowly to leave. As I closed the door, I felt peace. I wasn't cruel. I was honest. Forgiveness might come, but on my terms, when I was truly ready. Time continued to heal my wounds, slowly but surely. My family remained distant, never reaching out again. I heard occasional rumors about them struggling to rebuild their lives, but I no longer cared. My focus shifted entirely toward building a future free from toxic relationships. Looking back now, I realize that their betrayal forced me to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. What began as unbearable humiliation at Jessica's birthday party had transformed into the greatest empowerment of my life. I'd survived their worst and had come out stronger than ever. Today, my life feels completely different. I have genuine friends who value and support me. I've earned respect professionally, and my story inspires others facing similar emotional abuse. I finally understand that family isn't always about blood. It's about those who treat you with love and respect. Despite everything, I hold no bitterness. I've reclaimed my dignity and happiness on my own terms. My family's betrayal led me down a difficult path, but that path brought me freedom and courage I never thought possible. As I close this chapter, I look forward to a future filled with possibilities, unafraid and empowered by all I've overcome. My journey taught me that sometimes the hardest battles we face become our greatest victories.
My name is Nancy. I have a 7 years older brother named Keith. Ever since he was a child, he excelled academically. His performance was top-notch from an early age, and he graduated from prestigious high school and university. Naturally, our parents were very proud of him and often spoke about how Keith is so amazing. Perhaps due to this environment, his personality became warped as he grew up. Always being expected to excel and constantly praised may have caused him to overestimate himself. Upon graduating from university and finding a new job, he decided to leave our family home. When he left, he sarcastically remarked, "I can't bear such a mundane life in this house anymore," with a wry smile. I'll never forget the look on our parents' faces at that moment. With a look that couldn't hide their surprise and a hint of sadness, they said, "In the past, Keith was always cheerful and cherished us." Honestly, I was angry then. I never stood out like my brother in studies or sports, and the high school I attended wasn't super prestigious, but I valued the bond and love of our family. Both my brother and I owe our lives to our parents' support. I wished he felt that too. During my high school years, I realized daily how precious the warmth and love of a family are. Strangely, my brother didn't seem to feel that love. Our parents had watched over us siblings for a long time, pouring endless love onto us. Yet, my brother seemed to see them as ordinary people, and that weighed on my heart. As a child, my brother was like a hero to me. Seeing him handle everything perfectly made me want to be like him. He used to care about me, play with me, and help me study. However, he changed. By the time I was about to graduate high school, he began to say things like, "Do you really need higher education? And you're wasting your time on such things." Whenever our parents confronted him about his attitude, he retorted, "I became this way because of you." I cried then, but my parents hugged me and said, "Nancy, you've grown into a truly kind-hearted person." Encouraged by their kindness, I managed to get into a national university and secured a job at my dream company. Since my mother had given birth to me relatively late in life, by the time I started working, my parents were almost 60. By then, my brother was already married, but oddly enough, neither my parents nor I had met his wife. My parents had brought up the idea of inviting him home several times, but he always hesitated, saying, "It's a bit of a consideration to introduce her to our family," and avoided bringing his wife to our house. About half a year has passed since I started my life as a new member of the workforce. Just when I thought I was gradually getting accustomed to my job, an unexpected event occurred. During work hours, when I usually wouldn't receive personal calls, my cell phone displayed an incoming call from my mother. Normally, my mother knows I'm at work, so she wouldn't call. I stepped outside and discreetly answered the phone. My mother's voice was softer than usual. "Hey, are you okay? Are you busy right now?" "No, I'm okay." "What happened?" "The thing is, your father suddenly fell ill." I felt a weight on my chest at those words. I immediately informed my supervisor about the situation, ran to the station to catch a taxi, and hurried to the hospital my mother had told me about. Along the way, I repeatedly hoped and prayed in my mind, wondering how my father was and hoping that he was all right as I headed to the hospital. When I entered the waiting room, my mother, tears streaming down her face, greeted me. "What happened, Mom?" I sat next to my mother, filled with worry. How did my father, who was fine in the morning, suddenly end up in this condition? Unable to process that question, words poured out of my mouth one after another. After a pause, she quietly said, "Your father has been diagnosed with cancer." Hearing this, I felt as if time had stopped. Why? My surprise and anxiety from deep within spilled out in my voice. My mother took a deep breath and began to speak with sadness. "It's stage 4. The cancer has spread to the bile duct, and they said it's hard to remove it all." After that, my mother couldn't stop her tears, and I choked on my words multiple times as I listened. "So, what treatment will be done next?" I asked my mother, seeking hope. She nodded somberly after a short pause. After a while, the attending physician came and explained the detailed condition and the treatment. My father's illness had progressed more than expected, and metastasis to other parts had been confirmed. Therefore, even if they operated, there was a significant risk, and they couldn't guarantee success. My mother and I held hands, trying to come to terms with this reality. The doctor's words were matter of fact, making us acutely aware of the harsh reality we faced. Specifically, you can either continue with chemotherapy or choose support in a palliative care ward. Both are crucial choices, so we'd like the family to discuss and decide together. The doctor's calm words resonated in my ears. As I slowly sat down on the sofa in the corner of the waiting room, a silence spread between us. Only the ticking of the clock's second hand seemed to carve through the heavy atmosphere. Seeing tears quietly stream down my mother's face, I pondered how to approach the situation. It was a challenging time to communicate, but necessary procedures had to be followed to move forward. We should include Keith in this conversation. Let's contact him immediately and discuss making a decision together. I suggested it and picked up my smartphone. With a wry smile, my mother confided, "Actually, I've already informed Keith, but he hasn't responded." At that moment, recalling past events and my brother's nature, I had a certain premonition. When he sought help, he'd get extremely upset if he didn't respond quickly. Yet, he tended to run away from situations requiring tough decisions. However, believing that the opinions of the entire family were essential this time, I kept calling him. After more than 10 attempts, I finally heard my brother's slightly irritated voice. "What do you want? Calling me over and over? Brother, do you fully understand Dad's condition? Mom should have informed you in detail. Why haven't you come to the hospital?" My voice was imbued with both urgency and anxiety. After a brief pause, he sighed in seeming annoyance. Of course I know. But unlike you, I'm swamped with work. Dad's still alive, isn't he? I don't think there's any need to be overly concerned. His words lacked any shred of understanding or empathy, deeply shaking me. This isn't a joke. We don't know what could happen to Dad at any moment. Have you forgotten how much he's worked for our family? We are here today because of his support. I felt tears threatening to spill. However, without showing any emotion, my brother curtly said, "Now's not the time to be fussing over this. There's no point in discussing further." I'm hanging up and promptly ended the call. Stunned by the exchange, I was at a loss. I couldn't hide my astonishment at my brother's indifference. I knew he lacked a sense of family bond and gratitude, but I never thought he'd grown into such a detached person. When I returned to my mother, a look of concern was evident on her face. "What happened?" she inquired. I replied, "It seems he is quite busy now," avoiding the details. My mother sighed deeply, murmuring, "It would have been comforting if Keith was here." My father chose to spend his final moments in a palliative care ward, and a few months after that decision, he quietly passed away. I informed my brother of this somber news over the phone and conveyed the details of the wake and funeral. However, his response was cold, stating, "I'm busy with work, so I can't attend. Please proceed without me." True to his word, he didn't appear at our father's wake or funeral. It seemed even my mother was shocked by this fact. She probably never imagined her son wouldn't show up for his father's funeral. Both family and acquaintances expressed their surprise and disappointment at his absence. After the funeral, when a moment of quiet settled amongst the family, my mother exhaled deeply, muttering to herself, "He really didn't come." I took her hand and said firmly, "Mom, let's not worry about him anymore. We have to let him walk his path. For now, let's cherish our memories of Dad." My mother tightly squeezed my hand in response. My mother smiled and replied, "Thank you." Unbelievably, the next day, my older brother suddenly appeared at the apartment where we live. When I opened the door, his expression was different from usual, filled with an urgent restlessness. Stepping inside, he demanded without any greeting, "Where is the inheritance father left behind?" Shocked by his demand, I emotionally retorted, "Seriously? Someone who didn't even show up at the funeral, and now you're saying this?" At my words, my brother, visibly irritated, snapped, "Kids should stay quiet." The atmosphere became instantly tense, but my mother stepped forward, trying to calm the situation. "Apart from this apartment, your father didn't leave much behind," she explained. "There's no way that's true." My brother retorted, barely concealing his anger. Remaining calm, my mother placed my father's passbook on the table for my brother to see. Flipping through it, it became clear that all the savings our father had were transferred to a different account. "What is this all about?" my brother exclaimed in surprise. Mother replied gently, "Your father had instructed you to move all the money to my account earlier. Also, this apartment's name has been changed, and now it's in my name." My brother, taken aback, was at a loss for words. He merely clicked his tongue in frustration and left. As we watched his departing figure, we were once again filled with admiration and gratitude for our father's foresight and his plan to protect the family. A few months later, my mother suddenly fell ill and was immediately taken to the hospital. It was completely unexpected, and the family was filled with shock and concern. The diagnosis revealed that she had pneumonia, and it was in a more advanced stage than we thought. I remembered her coughing slightly recently. When she had seen a doctor at a small clinic before, she had been diagnosed with a minor cold. We felt relieved at that diagnosis and didn't worry further. However, detailed examinations at a major hospital revealed her condition was much more severe than we thought, and she had only about 3 months to live. Hearing this, I was at a loss for words. I couldn't believe it, especially when she seemed so healthy. As expected, or perhaps tragically, just a few days after the 3-month mark, my mother quietly passed away. The space without her was filled with an indescribable stillness and sorrow. Why didn't I notice sooner? Why didn't I take her to a bigger hospital immediately? Filled with guilt and grief, I shed tears countless times. Even after hearing about my mother's passing, there was no sign of my brother coming to our house. My aunt, my mother's sister, and I handled the arrangements for the wake and the funeral. Understandably, it was a significant shock for my aunt that my brother didn't appear at our mother's last rites, just as he hadn't for our father's. Although my aunt was extremely outraged, I felt that expecting anything or saying anything to my brother was meaningless after recalling his past actions. However, a few days after the funeral, as my aunt and I were sorting out the heirlooms, my brother appeared again, accompanied by his wife, whom we were meeting for the first time. "Where's Mom's inheritance? She must have left something, right?" From the get-go, that's what my brother brought up. I was both shocked and dumbfounded. My aunt, equally stunned, stared at him in disbelief. And the most astonishing thing was that beside my brother stood his wife, my new sister-in-law, who neither met our eyes nor greeted us. She just stood silently next to my brother. Even more shocking was that my brother did not even visit our mother's grave. "Brother, please, at least pay your respects to our parents. At the very least, visit Mom's grave," I said calmly. With a sneering laugh, my brother responded, "Does that even mean anything?" He then quickly followed with, "By the way, how much of Mom's inheritance is left?" At that moment, my aunt's expression changed drastically. In a voice filled with anger, contrasting with her usual warmth, she sternly admonished, "Keith, how can you think of such things at a time like this? Nancy is managing the funeral on behalf of both of you, putting in all her effort. Shouldn't you act with a bit of gratitude, thinking of your parents?" However, my brother completely ignored our aunt's anger, responding dismissively, "Auntie, it's none of your business. Don't interfere." Suddenly, with the demands made by my brother and sister-in-law, the atmosphere in the room became cold and tense. From behind my brother, my smiling sister-in-law said, "Of course. I remember your name, Nancy. Do you plan to keep all of your mother's inheritance for yourself? Sorry, but we can't allow that. This apartment is so lovely, I think it's perfect for us." I never imagined that my brother and his wife would say such things. "Why should I have to leave for the sake of both of you?" I asked, my voice quivering. While twirling her finger, my sister-in-law continued, "This apartment has just been renovated, and its location is amazing. It's close to the station and there are plenty of shops. So, we'll be living here." I was at the peak of my anger. "Big brother, all you care about is the inheritance. What are you thinking?" I couldn't hold back and raised my voice. Turning away, my brother let out a heavy sigh. "Such vulgar behavior. Do you think raising your voice solves everything? We'll be back here in 3 days. Have everything ready to move out by then." With those words, their intentions became crystal clear. A mix of my anger and sadness bubbled up, and I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. But this wasn't just a one-time event. I had to think about what to do next. Determined, I wiped my tears. My aunt gently tapped my shoulder and handed me a letter. The delicate handwriting of my mother adorned the envelope's surface. "What's this, Auntie?" I asked, carefully opening the envelope. "Your mother entrusted this to me for a just-in-case scenario. She told me to give it to you at the right moment," my aunt said, tears forming in her eyes. I unfolded the paper inside. My mother's beautiful handwriting filled the page. "To my precious Nancy, if you are reading this letter, it means I'm no longer in this world. I'm truly sorry for our sudden parting." I felt warmth in the back of my eyes, tears beginning to flow. "You might have Keith visit the house concerning the inheritance. But don't worry. Everything that your father handed down to me is now yours." I was at a loss for words. I had no idea my mother had thought this far ahead and prepared everything in advance. "I'm sorry for suddenly leaving you alone, but I'm at peace, because I've seen how much you've grown into a wonderful person. While learning is essential, it's not everything. The kindness and compassion you learn through your interactions with people is what I believe holds the most value. Your father and I were genuinely happy to see you grow up with such a warm heart until our last days. And words can't express just how proud we are of you. I truly want to express my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you. Overwhelmed, I read on, deeply moved. Mom. The words before me blurred with my tears, but I was determined to take in every sentiment my mother had conveyed and continued reading. Actually, after your father passed away, following his wishes, I secretly changed the apartment's ownership to your name. I'm sorry for using your seal without permission, but it was both your father's and my wish. Please don't be angry. Life has its ups and downs. Even when things get tough, we want you to persevere and live your life fully. So, stay strong and find your happiness. The letter ended there. Tears streamed down my face, wetting the paper. My aunt, standing next to me, pressed her eyes and shed tears alongside me. My sister truly cared about you. In her heart, you were a treasure, my aunt said gently, holding my hand. From the envelope, a bankbook in my name emerged. It seemed like something my mother must have secretly made in the past. To my surprise, when I opened the bankbook, a substantial amount was recorded. I felt that this was probably the inheritance from my father that my mother had saved for me. A few days later, my brother and his wife showed up at the house. Without even knocking on the door, they entered as if it was their own home. It's time for you to leave, just as promised, right? My brother sarcastically said. As I stood still, my sister-in-law became irritated. Isn't it your duty to leave quickly? She said, almost as a command. For a moment, I felt overwhelmed by the atmosphere, but I took a deep breath, looked them straight in the eyes, and said calmly, actually, this house is now under my name. With that statement, the room's atmosphere became tense. My brother and his wife looked at each other, exclaiming, What? What kind of joke is this? I am the eldest son. I should inherit the house, right? My brother said, clearly shaken. Beside him, my sister-in-law stared at me, saying, This is the first I've heard of this. However, I had decided to state the facts. The house and the inheritance are all managed under my name. So, there's nothing to divide. My brother frowned, then handed over half of that inheritance to us. But this money was left for my future and to ensure that I take care of the house. You always looked down on me, and now you're asking for money. What changed? I questioned. His face turned red. Surprisingly, my sister-in-law exclaimed, Wait, what is this? This isn't what we were expecting. From what I gathered, my brother recently faced significant trouble at his job and was subsequently fired. Not only that, but he and his wife were moving from one day job to another, seemingly in a tight spot financially. They probably had high hopes for my mother's inheritance and the house. But with my revelation, their expectations were shattered and they began bickering, placing blame on one another. Watching their childish dispute, I thought, what can possibly be gained from all this? To them, I said calmly, This is my house now. If you make any unnecessary fuss, I'll call the police. Trembling with anger, they reluctantly accepted my words and left. Since then, I've had no contact with them. I deliberately deleted all their contact details and began a new life in this apartment. This apartment is my treasure, filled with memories of my father and mother. Now, I have a loving partner by my side. We plan to build a new family in this apartment. He respects my decision and proposed that we take the first step of our new life here. Our future is bright, and I want to pass on the warm love my parents gave me to the children we will have in the future. My name is Lindsay. I'm a 29-year-old company employee, and this year means I'm getting older still. I met Jake, a year older than me, through friends, and we decided to marry 6 months after we started dating. Jake, who made a name for himself in tennis during his student days, is an active person who continues to play tennis even now. As I was in the tennis club during my student days, we immediately found common ground together. Once we started dating, we would often play tennis together on the weekends. One day, after our date, Jake proposed to me and we decided to get married. It's been almost 3 years since we got married. We don't have children, but we bought an apartment after getting married and have been living together ever since. Both of us work, and while we aren't struggling financially, we can't say that we're wealthy either. We're living a happy life. However, something happened between us that shattered my peaceful days. One day, Jake suddenly asked me to come to his parents' house. Surprised, I hurried there to find Jake, his parents, and an unknown woman waiting for me. As I struggled to understand the situation, Jake suddenly knelt down and said, "Lindsay, I'm truly sorry. The truth is, I've been involved with this woman here, Olivia. Last week, we found out that Olivia is pregnant. I feel responsible for her and the baby. So I think it's better that we separate. I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." Jake shocked me with this revelation. Exposed to his infidelity, the pregnancy, and faced with his demands for divorce, I was stunned. That was when my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Lindsay, please forgive Jake. Yes, he cheated, but the problem lies with you too. You and Jake weren't really a good match from the beginning. So, I'm sorry, but please forget about him." And my father-in-law added, "Olivia's father is an executive at a major company. A man in a totally different position from someone like your poor father. I think you know who's more suitable for our son." I couldn't believe it. Jake's father belittled not only me, but also my father too. Normally, parents would put the blame on their son for cheating, but Jake's parents didn't seem to think that way. Instead, they seemed to think it was natural for us to divorce, and that their son had done nothing wrong. I took the divorce papers and said, "I understand what you all want to say. Being with people who have such warped thoughts might affect me too. I'm shocked at how you make it seem like I'm the villain despite Jake's infidelity. Don't worry, I'll file these divorce papers myself. I'll leave the rest to a lawyer." And with that, I quickly left the scene. As I left, my father-in-law mockingly said, "A poor person hiring a lawyer? What a waste of time and money, when she doesn't even have any. She shouldn't bite off more than she can chew." Ha ha ha. Ignoring him, I left his parents' house and immediately went to City Hall to file the divorce papers. At least I was able to end my marriage with Jake. The next day, surprisingly, Jake and Olivia came to my apartment. Seeing me, Jake said, "Oh, you're still here? You haven't even packed your things. You're taking your time, aren't you?" Hearing this, Olivia also looked at me curiously. I was furious at Jake's words. "What are you talking about? You're the one who should be taking it slow. This is my house, so you should be the one to leave. The movers are coming soon to take all your belongings to your parents' house. If there's anything you don't want them to touch, you should take it now," I retorted. Hearing this, Jake suddenly panicked. "What? This is my house. The ownership should be in my name," he exclaimed. I was dumbfounded. After all, this apartment was bought in my name. I had already told Jake about this, and about my family's background before we got married. But it seems that Jake is the type to conveniently forget things that don't suit him. Perhaps this carefree nature is why he was easily swayed by Olivia. I showed the deed to the apartment and my name was clearly written on it. Jake's face quickly changed upon seeing it. Meanwhile, Olivia's face began to cloud over with anger. "Jake, what is this all about? This is completely different from what you told me before. Were you deceiving me?" Olivia began to confront him. This is strange. What's happening?" Jake responded in confusion. "That's not an answer. Explain yourself." Olivia pressed on. "First, this is my house, so please take your argument outside. And just so you know, Jake has various debts. So if you're planning to marry him, be prepared for that burden." I calmly stated the facts to Olivia. Hearing this, Olivia seemed about to say something, but I didn't care and kicked both of them out of the room, slamming the door behind them. After a while, I could hear them arguing outside the door, but it eventually quieted down. About an hour later, the movers finally arrived and took all of Jake's belongings to his parents' house. The room was now clean, and I was relaxing in the newly organized space. But it was short-lived. Suddenly, the intercom rang repeatedly. I cautiously opened the door with the chain lock still on, and my mother-in-law was standing there. "Hello, is there something you need?" "Lindsay, why did you keep such an important thing a secret? What are you talking about? I can't believe it, but Jake just told me that this apartment is in your name and that your parents are the owners of that famous restaurant chain." It seemed Jake finally remembered my family's circumstances. "What about it? If I had known, I would never have let this divorce happen. A daughter from such a wealthy family. We would love to have you back in our family. Lindsay, please, reconsider and start over with Jake." I was shocked and at a loss for words at her outrageous request. I couldn't possibly agree to what she was asking. "You really have a terrible way of thinking about things. Am I not a human being? Are you only interested in money? I'm sorry, but I don't want anything more to do with you. There's nothing more to talk about, so please leave," I said and attempted to close the door. But my mother-in-law, infuriated by my attitude, raised her voice in anger. "Don't be so arrogant. I'm giving you my permission to reconcile your differences. Fix things with him right now. I won't leave this spot until you agree to get back together. Open this door immediately." She said this, pounding on the door repeatedly. I decided that I couldn't handle this alone and called the police. They came and took my mother-in-law away. Even as the officers were taking her, she was shouting something loudly, but I no longer cared to listen to her words. There was a reason why my in-laws were unaware of my family's business background. My father, coming from a poor background since childhood, continued to live modestly, even after becoming a company president. He never considered buying branded clothes. He always took great care of his belongings and used them for a long time. Hence, at our wedding, he wore a suit he had bought decades ago. Seeing this, my in-laws assumed that my father was not financially well off and misunderstood his restaurant chain as a small, privately owned business. As a result, they never delved deeper into my father's business. Time went by without them understanding the true circumstances of my family. Days after managing to send my mother-in-law home, Jake tried to persuade me to reconcile our differences. His persistence was incredibly exhausting. It was surprising how insistent he was, despite the fact that he was the one who proposed the divorce. He seems to have a talent for quickly forgetting inconvenient truths. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock on, and Jake, upon seeing me, began to speak with teary eyes. "Lindsay, please, let's give it another try. Everything is my fault. I'm truly sorry. I still love you. Let's be together again." He then explained a sudden turn of events. Olivia had apparently approached Jake aiming to get his house, pretending to be pregnant to sway him. However, once she learned about Jake's considerable debts, she gave up and fled. And now, Jake was coming to me to seek reconciliation. "Huh? What are you saying? I don't know anything about that. How can you say that? After you cheated and brought up divorce, now that she's left you, you want to get back together? There's no limit to your audacity. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever come here again." I refused Jake right there and then. Surprisingly, he quietly left. However, this was not to be their last attempt. Days later, Jake's entire family unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. They were shouting, "Bring out Lindsay. Get that woman out here. We know she's here," causing chaos in the office and leading to the security guards being called. I stood there, dumbfounded by the situation. But they wouldn't have things their way any longer. I worked at the headquarters of my father's company, and that day, my father was also in the office. All of my colleagues also supported me. "Hey, what are you doing? This is my company. Don't just barge in and make a scene. I know everything you did to demean my daughter. Don't ever come near her again, and never set foot in this company again." My usually calm father shouted furiously at my ex-in-laws. Everyone, including the employees and Jake's family, must have been surprised at the anger of my father, who usually only shows his gentle and calm side. Sorry, we're really sorry. Jake's family desperately apologized. My father's stern words had immediately quieted them down. As they were being escorted out by security, my father shouted in a strong voice, "Don't you ever come here again, and never do something like this again. I won't allow it. You understand?" Hearing this, I couldn't stop myself from crying. I felt a deep sense of gratitude that my father had gotten so angry for my sake. Later, through the company's legal advisor, I decided to seek damages from Jake's family. I sought damages for the divorce due to Jake's infidelity, for his persistent attempts at reconciliation after the divorce, and for the disturbance at my workplace. The total amount was substantial, and I eventually received payment from them. I also made them sign a written agreement promising never to come before me again. Jake's family's state of affairs rapidly declined thereafter. Chased by the money owed to me and Jake's existing debts, they ended up selling their home and moving far away. In town, the story spread that Jake had committed adultery, divorced his wife, and after being abandoned by his mistress, attempted to reconcile. Facing such embarrassment, they could no longer stay in this town. While I felt a bit of sympathy for them, I also knew that everything was a consequence of their actions, so it was clearly deserved. Jake's family never appeared before me again. Finally, I was able to resume my peaceful days. However, my father had harsh words for me as well regarding what had happened. He blamed me for not recognizing before the marriage that Jake was a person who would commit adultery and accrue debts. Certainly, while Jake was at fault, my lack of insight was also partly to blame. Unable to argue with my father, I felt disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. I felt that I needed to give my heart a break. However, about a year later, I decided to marry my colleague, Matt. Matt was sincere and earnest in his work, trusted by everyone. I was initially attracted by his personality, but as we started dating, I was also drawn to his lifestyle. His life was surprisingly simple. He never indulged in branded items, used everyday things for a long time, but generously spent money and spoiled me on dates. His behavior was very similar to my father's. My father, who usually saves money, would splurge on family trips, bringing us joy. I deeply loved and respected my father. Realizing Matt's actions were similar to my father's, I felt that I could be happy with him in the future. Therefore, I decided to marry Matt. I was worried about being scolded by my father for remarrying within a year of my divorce, but his reaction was surprisingly positive, probably because he had heard of Matt's reputation at work and knew of his character. There was nothing bad said about Matt, and from my father's perspective as the company president, Matt seemed to be performing exceptionally well. "I feel confident that Matt will take good care of you, Lindsay," my father told me happily. Matt and I were happily married. Not long after our marriage, we discovered that I was with a child. The happiest person to hear this news was undoubtedly my father. I was so glad to see my father happy. Reflecting on my time with Jake, where we didn't have children even after 3 years of marriage, it seemed like a stroke of luck. Matt and I plan to take over the company in the future. We are currently learning the basics of management from my father. Although there are many challenges, we accept that they are our responsibility as successors, and we are working hard together. We believe that we will need even more effort for the sake of our upcoming child, despite all that's happened. I am now very happy. Together with my family, we intend to firmly support this company in the future.